Everybody saw the front page of probably every major newspaper in New Jersey this morning. And so congratulations to all of you and all of us for doing the right thing in New Jersey. But good afternoon, and on behalf of the Capital City Area Black Caucus and the Black Cannabis Equity Initiative and our sponsors, I welcome you to today's Cannabis Legalization Discussion and Recognition Program. My name is John Bailey, and I'm the convener of the Black Cannabis Equity Initiative, a Capital City Area Black Caucus founder, and your moderator for today's discussion. The purpose of this meeting is simple: to broaden the cannabis dialogue in New Jersey by including more voices in this legalization discussion, and to recognize some people who have helped us to get to this point of cannabis legalization in New Jersey. A few ground rules. We have a few people on this Zoom meeting, so please keep your mute buttons on to minimize all noise. And Sam, I'm asking you to mute everybody that comes in to the meeting. I will moderate and guide us through this meeting. I will recognize and introduce each speaker and pose any questions to be asked. There will be no direct Q&A for our speakers. The way a question is posed is by typing it into the chat. If time permits, I will recognize the question and the person to answer. But before we get into our discussion, we'll have a few brief remarks from members of our esteemed Capital City Area Black Caucus Founders Group. And our first speaker is our host today, the Honorable Mercer County Commissioner, Sam Frisbee.
Thank you, John, and good afternoon to everyone. As one of the founders of the CBAC and Mercer County Commissioner, I want to welcome each of you to this cannabis legislation in New Jersey discussion. We needed to have this inclusive conversation with all the stakeholders. And if I must say, we have a really impressive group in this lineup. I also wanted to congratulate all of the honorees, the New Jersey Beacon of Lights and the New Jersey Cannabis Champions, Scott Rudder, and my good friend and cannabis business partner, Associate President Ed DeVoe. My concern, and I will refer to this a little bit more in the government panel, is how this legislation will ultimately impact counties and municipalities and citizens, especially citizens of color. You know, 400 years ago, we were brought over here on boats, and my main objective is to make sure that we don't miss the boat on this opportunity. So thank you again for coming, and we look forward to a wonderful conversation today. Thanks, John.
Thank you. While we're waiting on, Janine, are you there yet? Okay, while we're waiting on Janine LaRue, our next CCABC founder, President and CEO of the African American Chamber of Commerce of New Jersey, the Honorable John Harmon.
John, thank you. And my colleague, the Honorable Samuel Frisbee, just delighted to be here today. This is an important event today. Just honored to be a part of this cannabis in New Jersey legalization discussion. There's a lot of thanks to go around to my colleagues on the CABC and Black Cannabis Equity Initiative and other sponsors, elected officials, and just all that are here today. We just want to thank you. We want to thank you for recognizing the efforts of the African American Chamber of Commerce of New Jersey in this regards. And moreover, just want to thank you for making business the focus of today's discussion. It's all about our piece of the pie. And so without further ado, I'll be back a little later on, but this is a meaningful, focused discussion. We must keep our eye on the prize. It's just starting as it relates to the legislation, but we got to focus on the money. God bless you.
Thank you. Our next Capital City Area Black Caucus founder speaker, my good friend, TS. I call him, y'all call him Tracy Syfax. I call him the true story because I think he represents the real story of the cannabis industry. For those who are listening, listen to this guy because he knows he has experience to share. Tracy.
Thanks a lot, JB, for that warm introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. As one of the founders of the Capital City Area Black Caucus, I am truly honored to be recognized today and to share my thoughts on the cannabis legalization here in New Jersey. This is not just an important conversation, but a critical community and industry conversation. I have a story to tell, and I have shared it with many people in many places across this country. The message has always been the same. social equity is really about opportunity. I will talk more about that later on the panel. However, I am here to be helpful and to take part in a good conversation with some very good people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tracy. And our other Capital City Area Black Caucus founder who has remarks, who has her Santa Claus hat on in the Zoom room, the Honorable Janine LaRue, New Jersey, in my mind, New Jersey's top lobbyist. Janine?
How you doing, Brother John? Thank you so much. And to you and Commissioner Frisbee and all the magnificent people who are a part of this forum today. I am thrilled to be a part of the discussion. I'm going to be in listening mode today. I'm festive today because we had a holiday party and I figured I might as well bring the party with me. Scott Rutter, what you have done for the whole area of cannabis in this state, we don't know how to say thank you to you any more than we can. I'm sure you're getting accolades all over the place. While I only see the photograph of Senator Scutari, I know he's somewhere on the line. It's so great that you're going to be a part of this discussion. And my own Mayor, Reed Gustior, who's known for this throughout the country. Congratulations, Ed DeVoe. And I'm excited to hear what we're going to cover here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. And with that, let me thank our sponsors for supporting today's Zoom meeting. And they are 1906, Pure Genesis, Columbia Care, New Jersey, Capital City Area Black Caucus, the Black Cannabis Equity Initiative, the African American Chamber of Commerce of New Jersey, the New Jersey Cannabis Business Association, the New Jersey Cannabis Trade Association, Minorities for Medical Marijuana, Garden State Normal, American Civil Liberties Union, Coalition for Medical Marijuana New Jersey, Doctors for Cannabis Regulation, the National Cannabis Industry Association, Douglas H. Palmer and Associates, New Jersey NAACP, and Sativa Cross. The Black Community Cannabis Initiative, in conjunction with our sponsors, hosting today's conversation on cannabis legalization in New Jersey. What's next? There's so much happening in the national and state landscape around this billion-dollar industry, and so much dialogue and confusion around expungement, pardons, opportunity, access to capital, accountability, and much, much more. That BCI, with the support of the many of you on this call, has pulled together this meeting, this Zoom discussion, this New Jersey Cannabis Work Group on cannabis legalization. Not all of the stakeholders are here. However, this is our first discussion, and the goal is to host these types of conversations bi-monthly. And as the conversation continues, and it will, hopefully they can join us. The Black Cannabis Equity Initiative is holding these cannabis Zoom conversations as a place and an opportunity to have authentic cannabis legalization discussion, as well as look at the social equity impact on the state and on New Jersey residents in their local communities. BCI is not advocating for social equity opportunity for John Bailey, but is advocating for opportunity and access for Black businesses, and BCI has a pathway and plans to do that. BCI plans that the reason we don't know what social equity looks like as a society is because we've never seen it, and the cannabis industry is no exception. BCI is in the forefront of social equity efforts and is bringing able, stable, bold, and creative leadership to the social equity discussion. Our emphasis has been on developing an authentic social equity dialogue. And to do that, from my point of view, requires engaging the cannabis industry and the stakeholders with 3 topics for initial interaction. The first, a recognition of past abuses, restrictions, barriers, the war on drugs, and institutional and systemic racism, and the lack of capital. Secondly, a recognition of the need for equity capacity building with a social dialogue. And for those who don't know what a social dialogue is, a cannabis social dialogue is a constructive and instructive conversation around cannabis social equity, as well, and will enable and assist social partners who are trying to influence the arrangement, development, and enactment of equitable economic, public, and social policies, as well as to manage positive change and achieve economic and social goals. Examples of social dialogue activity includes mutual information exchange, open discussion and dialogue, exchanges of opinions and ideas, consultations and negotiations. And what we are doing today is part of that social dialogue. And then thirdly, a recognition of the need for equity sustainability with authentic relationships, partnerships, sponsorships, opportunity, and accountability. Today's session is a part of the BCI's ongoing efforts to continue to support the many Black voices in the New Jersey cannabis legalization and social equity discussion. to provide a realistic vision of what authentic and fair social equity is and what it should and can look like in New Jersey, to present the best practices with viable expert cannabis legalization input, guidance, and social equity direction, to provide programs, community and industry education, awareness and access points for partnerships, to be a pathway and a bridge between the Black community and cannabis leaders for purposes of promoting positive growth, equitable opportunity, and accountability in the state's cannabis industry. This statement is a recognition and an acknowledgement that there is still much work to be done, and there are still many more questions and answers right now. And with that said, I want to take a minute, we want to take a minute to recognize some of the people who have helped to make this amendment on legalization in New Jersey become a reality. Friends, New Jerseyans, countrymen, countrywomen, lend me your ear. We come here not to bury, but to honor. And our first honoree is Scott Rutter, the past president of the New Jersey Cannabis Association, who received the Black Cannabis Equity Initiative Cannabis Community Service Award for his many years of service to New Jersey residents and the cannabis industry. And here to make brief remarks on behalf of Scott Rutter from 1906 is Jackie Cornell, who is 1906 is sponsoring this award. And Jackie, are you with us yet?
I am. Hi. Good afternoon, everybody. I am just really excited to be with you all today. Sorry I was a few minutes late, so I'm sure that John mentioned this, but John is, had been planning this, and here we are today after a historic day yesterday. So it feels just really good to be here with all of you. And thank you, John, for doing this and for bringing us all together in what has been such a year, right? I wish that we could all be together in person. But when it comes to how we got to this place, there are so many individuals just like flipping through the gallery of folks on this call that helped to bring us to where we are today. And Scott is one of those leading forces. The mayor of marijuana, our brother on the other side, helping us with Republicans and helping them to see the light. But we wouldn't be where we are today without Scott. And so I know we have a long list of speakers and a long agenda here, but Scott, I'm just really excited to be able to recognize your contribution as you phase in to your next phase of things, and so excited for Edmund and the team and sort of all of the new invigoration that he, I know, will bring to the group and to this space and to this activism that we've got before us. Yesterday was definitely not the end. There's still so much work to do, but we wouldn't have been here without Scott. So thank you, Scott, and thanks to your team for getting us to this point.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you to 1906 for being a sponsor of our community service. Our next speaker is the gentleman who is replacing the gentleman that we are recognizing. And what better focus for me as a person of African-American descent to see somebody like Ed DeVoe as the president of the New Jersey Cannabis Association, because this suggests that we are authentic. And Ed, as we all know, is an authentic human being. And Scott, this is a very wise choice. And so Scott, Ed, would you want to come forward and say a few things to Scott?
Thank you so much, John, and greetings to everyone during this holiday season. I can't think of any better circumstance in life than when you get to work with your friends. Scott and I started off as business associates, business partners, and that relationship quickly turned into friendship. When you work with your friends, you get to see the real person. Not that you agree on everything, but the fact that you can agree to disagree, the fact that when you're a leader and you can say, help me, says a lot about you. When Scott took the reins of the Cannabis Association, he turned to me probably more often than I thought he would, and he asked for my input, not just as a Black man, but as a professional. And that said a lot about Scott, his character, and his leadership. And so Scott, as you've handed the mantle over, you have left big shoes to fill. And I hope that I do the association justice as you have. And I hope that for all of my peers and colleagues on this Zoom call, that I hope I live to the standard that we were blessed to have Scott Rutter set. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. And ladies and gentlemen, our BCI Cannabis Community Service Honoree, the Honorable Scott Rutter.
Geez, this is a
Don't
little
cry,
bit
don't
unexpected.
cry, don't cry, don't cry.
So, well, John, thank you very much. Ed, Jackie, thank you very much. That's a humbling statement, but I mean, I'm looking at Jim Miller, and I'm looking at Ed Grimes, and I'm looking at Ed Forcione, people who have been doing this for decades. I'm looking at Reed Gussiora, who has been doing this for decades. I'm looking at Nick Scutari, who's been talking about this.
No, I don't have to. No.
For
I mean,
a very long time, for 15 years, been fighting this fight. I'm humbled by this recognition, but I can tell you there are giants on this that deserve this. I mean, you look at a guy like Weedman, who sacrificed almost everything on a regular basis just to get the attention of legislators, just to get the attention of people to understand what this is a product that should not be at all criminalized. You look at guys like Ed Grimes, who, who's been out front, rain, snow, doesn't matter, out front of the State House with his messaging. You know, Jim Miller and his trials and tribulations, walking the halls with his wife, walking the halls of Washington, D.C., all that they have done. This is humbling. I got to tell you, I did not expect this, the way this came out, John. But it's been an honor to be on this path. I am so thrilled that this is where we are, that we got to the other side of legalization. And as Jackie said earlier, the battle, the fight continues. What we passed, what the legislature passed yesterday is a starting point, not the final point. I mean, there's so many things that are in there that are imperfect. Home grow for patients still needs to happen. There's a lot of goodness that needs to happen. We need to ensure that the social equity promises that are in that legislation are fulfilled. And that's not going to be solved under one bill, one time. That's a continuing conversation. And as Ed knows, when we started the NJCBA, and I see Marianne Bays on here. Hey, Marianne, she was a very integral part of this whole process as well. I mean, again, the giants that are here on this call, John, the people that rallied to your call, there's so many here, so many folks like Dr. Nathan and others. So I'm honored to have this, but I can assure you this. When I started this journey 4 years ago, I did not think at all in this process that I would be in any way, shape, or form being honored for any social justice related stuff, right? Just because it was, we're going to create an industry group and we're going to go out and create an industry sort of infrastructure. But the more you learn and you listen and you hear the impact it was on people who lost their freedom, the patients who did not have access, and all those other things along this path, and how prohibition started in the first place through racism and greed. This path has really opened up my eyes, and I get credit for being the Republican in the room, one of the only Republicans in the room, if not the only Republican in the room in these discussions. I'm honored to be that guy, and I'm honored to take that and talk to my Republican friends, my family members, my Republican colleagues in the legislature, other mayors, and have this discussion. So, John, thank you very much for honoring for doing this. This is unnecessary, uncalled for, but I'm deeply honored for it. But the giants that are on here, I'm just so glad. So thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And we're going to acknowledge those giants, but we thought because of the transition, because of the legislation, because of the message coming from the streets, we thought that this was an appropriate way to being able to say good luck to what's next. And I'm a firm believer in recognizing folks for the work they do while they're here in the moment. And this is your moment in time, as well as our next recognition goes to New Jersey citizens who have been beacons of light in the industry. And from the very beginning, they have brought attention and kept a spotlight on the cannabis issue. And they are. Scott, you've been one. By the first one that we're going to read, I'll take a moment, is the Honorable Nicholas Scutari, New Jersey State Senator. Y'all saw what has been going on in the legislature. It's not always been pretty, but it's always been moving in the right direction. And Senator, well, we don't have you speaking right now. We do have you on one of the panels, as we go into these awards, I just wanted to make sure that we all gave you a big round of applause and thank you for your leadership on a continuous basis for what you did in the legislature. Our next honoree in the Beacon of Light is the Honorable Jamel Holly, one of those also folks who have done that Beacon of Light work and been there with the Senator, the Honorable Andrew Zicker, Beacon of Light, the Honorable Reed Garciora, Leo Bridgewater from Minorities for Medical Marijuana. And Scott mentioned Ed New Jersey Weedman Forshone. And you know, we all have a great debt to pay to Ed, and we can't say that enough. And so I'm very proud to call him a New Jersey cannabis legalization advocate. Another beacon of light is Ken Walsey, the Executive Director of the Coalition for Medical Marijuana. Jim Miller, the Jersey Cannabis Advocate. Edward Lefty Grimes. Many of you know him as Lefty. Very few of you know him as Edward. I don't even know him as Edward. I've always got the information as Lefty Grimes, who is a podcaster for Sativa Cross. And then Bill Caruso, attorney, Archer Law and General Counsel for the New Jersey Cannabis Association. Let's give all those folks, our Cannabis Beacon of Light folks, a big hand. And then our next series of recognitions go to New Jersey citizens who have been cannabis champions in the industry. They have supported the efforts of the Beacon of Lights, but they also have kept moving the cannabis legalization movement and the needle forward. And they are the Honorable Troy Singleton, New Jersey State Senator, Tracy Syfax, CEO of the Fax Group. And by the way, if you don't know, he is also on the DEI, which is the Cannabis Trade Federation Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force, doing good things at the national level. Tracy Syfax. John Harmon, President and CEO of the African Chamber of Commerce of New Jersey, who's also on the U.S. Chamber Board and dealing with the inequality of opportunity with the U.S. Chamber. And so we have folks on this list and in the state who are thought leaders. The Reverend Charles Boyer, pastor of Bethel AME Church. Ed DeVoe, the new president, the New Jersey Cannabis Association. The Honorable Douglas Palmer, Director of Community Outreach for Curio Wellness. The Dr. David Nathan, founder and board president, Doctors for Cannabis Legalization. Our good friend, and even though she doesn't get enough recognition, one of the voices in the cannabis industry that I think we need to pay much more attention to is that of Charletta McKeithen, Executive Director of the Garden State Normal and the Normal Foundation. Amos Sinha, Director of American Civil Liberties Union. Archbishop Timothy Paul, with the Christian Orthodox Church. Young brother who's doing unbelievable work in the industry and doesn't even know that we've been watching him is Tahir Johnson, the membership manager, the DEI coordinator, the National Cannabis Industry Association. A woman who is doing cannabis medical in our state and has been waiting for this for a long time is Faye Coleman, CEO of Pure Genesis. Scott mentioned Marianne Bays, Vice President of New Jersey Cannabis Association. Jessica Gonzalez, the only Hispanic that I've seen in any of these calls relative to what's going on with social equity. And so I'm glad to see you, little sister. She's an attorney with Bressler, Amory, and Ross. Tara Masu, another person of color in the industry who's the CEO for Tara Masu LLC and Blazing Bakery. And our last honoree, which you met earlier, Jackie Cornell, who's Director of Policy and Health Innovations for 1906. Let's give all of these folks a great big hand from Scott to our Beacons of Light, to our our New Jersey Cannabis Champions. And so with that, it gives me a great honor and pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. I hope that Christian has joined us. Chris, are you on?
Sorry, I'm right here. I just had to get off mute there.
Okay, no problem. I want to be able to introduce y'all to a friend, one of the top cannabis attorneys in the country. He is without a doubt a friend of the industry. He was a key architect for Amendment 66, which is a legalization of marijuana in Colorado. He is also the acting CEO of the National Cannabis Trade Federation. And because there's legalization newness in New Jersey, I've asked Christian to come and speak about some of the national actions and issues being discussed around cannabis, possible impact in New Jersey, and or share insights about the Colorado's cannabis journey. ladies and gentlemen, my good friend, CEO of the Cannabis Trade Federation, the Honorable Christian Cedarberg.
Thanks so much, Coach. And what an amazing group of people you put together here. And just want to start by saying congratulations to everyone who's been working on this issue. I know there's, with any law that passes, there's things that everyone wanted to, wanted to see in there, and there's things that get in, there's things that don't, and it's, the politics and everything else are super challenging. But, it's just from a 30,000 foot view as an outside observer, knowing what we did in Colorado, where we started with Amendment 64. John, you said 66, but I know you meant 64. We talk about all the time. But where we started with medical cannabis in 2010, and then the legalization initiative in 2012, which my partner Brian Vicente was the chair of, and we did a bunch of work on that. Started way from behind. It started really far behind in terms of issues that relate to having a diverse, equitable, and inclusive industry. And it wasn't from a bad place or with bad intentions. The politics were different. And also, a lot of these issues, even though they were important then, they weren't as nearly as much necessary focus as they are now. But all the things that we're trying to do to catch up and make up for the lost time and work on addressing these the inequities in the Colorado cannabis market, and as people consider us leaders for certain parts of the issues that come up, this is one of the places where we haven't been leading, but we're trying to get back there. Help of John and so many others, people on this call, and NCIA, MCBA, insert all sorts of people that have helped make Colorado a better place. But it's hard work. This is a ship, not a speedboat, and so where you start is incredibly important. And just looking at some of the important issues that are addressed in here, such a great starting place, and really proud, honored, and humbled to be a part of this conversation. I can see my colleague and Jen Cabrera, who runs our New Jersey office. She's a Newark native, first generation immigrant family from Cuba, and she's our Newark and New Jersey person. And I know she's been at times weighing in and testifying at the assembly on the necessity to look at things like caps on licenses, and just trying to make sure that this is something that can work for as many people as possible. And having done this all over the country, and knowing everything from a state like Oklahoma with very little barriers to entry to states that have almost barriers to entry that are very hard to overcome, I think there's a really some really awesome opportunities here. And if the tools are there for us to focus on on these issues that are critically important, they can only get better from here, is how I see it. And with so many people doing so much amazing work, the fact that I'm speaking to all of you is very humbling too. I know New Jersey is a complicated place, and I know it took a heavy lift to get everyone to be together, come together, and really get get the focus and get to a place that you got to. It's just incredible work, everyone. So I give applause to everyone again, and everyone who's on this call who didn't get applause, I'm giving you applause too. So John had mentioned that this Cannabis Trade Federation, which has been largely focused on federal work, alongside the good work being done by NCIA, the National Cannabis Roundtable, the Global Alliance, all sorts of really good groups along, the Minority Cannabis Business Association. I heard Minorities for Medical Cannabis, all these different groups that have been trying to push policies like the MORE Act forward at the federal level, which was, a huge win, and in a large way, a statement piece, for what this looks like at the federal level going forward. It's really the work being done on the ground in the states that are going to drive a big part of that conversation. But I'm proud to talk about CTF as something I put a lot of time and effort into. And, we as an organization, I see Tracy Syfax, there's a number of other folks, Peter Barzoom, Jackie with Jackie's company. We put a really good task force together that had a number of leaders from the National Urban League and the NAACP and the ACLU and people from the industry. And really what we were trying to accomplish with the group of people on the CTF board was just taking a hard look and saying, we need someone to give us some outside validation about what we should be doing, where we should be focusing. So we're not just talking about doing things or, doing the classic PR around for that initiative, but what should our core focus and core platform be? So we developed a platform with their help. Now we're moving into a phase of having an assessment tool, which is just saying all these companies need to be accountable. It's not just talking about it, but it's being accountable. This is something John's done, John Bailey's done here in Colorado to, at first it's scary, and a lot of these companies, look, let's be honest, this industry has not shown the diversity that reflects our country or individual states. It's just been a tough go of it on that front, but people are starting, people are taking a hard look in the mirror, and the first step is just being able to take that look in the mirror. And then, even if you don't do great on the scorecard or the report card, whatever you want to call it, well, you've only got room for improvement. And really proud of the groups, 1906 being one of them. And I'm sure there's a number of others on this call. So my apologies for not mentioning you by name, but really proud of the sort of the tone and what that's setting. And we're really happy to share that platform and everything we're doing with it, with everyone else, and just support and honor the really good work being done by the MCBAs, the medical minorities for medical cannabis, and others that are working on these issues. So really just, proud of New Jersey, proud of what's happening around the country. You guys just really put down a marker here for what I think is, although always imperfect, one of, in my mind, one of the best piece of legislation to push these issues forward that I've seen. So I'll end it there a little bit early for you, John, or I'm happy to take questions or do anything, talk with you or have a dialogue. But really just excited to work with you and make it to New Jersey and visit Jen and our team out there when we get a chance. But really excited for the future, you guys, and for the elected officials on the call that worked on this and everyone else. I'll say it one last time, my hat is off to you, and really moved, and what a great way to end an otherwise difficult year to see you guys push forward in such a meaningful way. So thanks for the time, and really appreciate, Coach, you including me on this, and looking forward to hearing from everyone else here.
So Christian, talk to me a little bit about, and talk to us a little bit about, if you had to deal with three issues: the challenges, the choices, and the opportunities. Give us that New Jersey feel that you might be able, because of the newness of the legalization, because of the fact that some of the stuff that we've gone through, they're now getting ready to go through. What might be some of the challenges, choices, and opportunities that you might suggest to be looked at moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, the challenges are always implementation and how does it actually work. You've got a bunch of words on paper, but how do you make sure that the words on paper, the letters followed, but also the spirit for the other attorneys, which I heard a couple of names, huge respect for. It's our job to kind of help to figure out, how to fit into new programs. But there's always things that are going to be in here that need some. This is not an attorney pitch, by the way, but there's always things in these laws that are going to be confusing, and maybe that gets us into the choices too. And there's a whole host of challenges I could talk about, Coach, but then you get to the choices too, and it's when you're making choices as companies and as an industry as a whole. How do we honor the spirit of the law in the choices that we make, and how to try to push forward with implementation and how we interpret these things? In a number of states, you've seen a lot of good words on paper, and but then when it comes down to when the rubber meets the road and when the law, people are actually executing on it. Now I'll talk bad about attorneys a little bit, but we're good at finding ways to honor the letter, but not the spirit. So the choices that are going to be made by companies, big, small, and in between and those of you leaders that are here, pushing this forward, is to always make the choices that honor what you probably know to be the spirit of this. But if not, there's probably many people you can ask, but make choices that further the broader cause of legalization, and which cannot be divorced from criminal justice reform, social justice issues. Anyone, if you're in the cannabis industry or want to be, I tell people, it's a business, it's a job. You got to get up, put your pants on, go to work and do the work. But you're now a drug policy person, whether you've chosen that on purpose or not. And if you don't understand the importance of that, and if you don't make decisions based upon that as a value base, then I think that your path to success and fulfillment can be limited. So the third one was opportunities. John, is that right? Challenge, choices, opportunities. I've kind of blended them together, but I think the opportunities here are to really take what you guys have done in getting it across the finish line and setting an example for the rest of the country. You know, people have talked over time, you know, well, look what they're doing in this state or this city or this, you know, or look at the federal legislation that's happening and how can we model things after that? I think you guys have an opportunity to be the model. And that means, you know, you're gonna have to evolve and adjust and fix the things that you think need fixing or work on the things that you can improve. And I think there's a huge opportunity to be leaders. I also think there's an opportunity for companies to support the small businesses and the opportunities there. And I think there's a real opportunity for business leaders in the industry and outside of the industry to get together and continue the work that's being done around the country to help help prop people up. And this is, you know, there's financial issues always, taxes, you know, I want to go down that rabbit hole right now, but you know, the opportunities to create good partnerships and create mentorship relationships and all the things that we've learned by making, you know, as many mistakes as we've made. I'll lay it out there as an offer to anyone on this call. And, you know, Jen's here too for this, you know, happy to talk through, you know, where we do things differently when it comes to nuance and looking forward to learning from everyone that's been working on this and just bringing, like I said, all the mistakes we've made is how we're better. It's a strange way to be successful, but if you make more mistakes than everyone and learn from those, then you can actually be pretty good at predicting where not to step in it again in the future. So it's an open offer for everyone. But, you know, there's going to be many challenges. I would just emphasize, try to make the choices that line up with the values that I think this bill expresses and what it's trying to say in the broader context of how important New Jersey is in this movement. This is a seminal moment, you know, and the opportunities are out there for all of you to be leaders individually and for you to make the state of New Jersey a shining light in this movement.
You know, Chris, Oregon are looking at taking their revoked license and making those social equity applicants. Michigan is looking at a weighted lottery. Chicago, their governor pardoned 11,000, 12,000 folks at the first of the year. In Colorado, we just passed social equity. The governor is getting ready to expunge, pardon 2,700 low-level cannabis offenses. And almost every state and every municipality, and just real quickly, Massachusetts just came out with 2 diversity license, social equity licenses. It's like every state is trying to find its own way. Every state is trying to find that which works for them. Can you comment on that?
Sure. It's interesting when we started with just broader legalization and, you know, it's going state by state and we're seeing entirely different ways of doing it. You know, you always hear about the melting pot, the states are the melting pots of democracy, where, you know, different ideas come up in different places and you see what works in one place and you kind of learn lessons from others. That's been going on with just sort of industry regulatory stuff and, you know, track and trace, like all these things that, you know, are the important but not as exciting issues. When it comes to this, you know, these issues, all these things you're talking about, I hear good ideas. You know, John, we were speaking last night, and you know, I felt like we got 2 or 3 new ideas that come out of it. It's really about, you know, looking at things and the biggest challenge is that there's always good intentions, but if you can't execute on them in a meaningful way, it's always, you know, it tends to set people up for disappointment or I don't want to say set them up for failure, but just not being as successful as you can. So we haven't seen all these things play out. What we've seen play out is that, you know, we're dealing with this in Los Angeles right now and other places where you have laws that talk about ownership, and ownership, you know, has to be vested. You know, these are where we're going to support ownership and have laws that support it. But if you don't, you know, it's tricky because then again, lawyers we will find ways to make sure we're honoring the letter of the law and maybe some of the spirit, but you know, the things we're working on is creating common contracts or, you know, here's what a standard contract looks like. So, and here's what we're trying to do here. And we know people are, you know, not bad people, but are doing this to work around it. You know, how are we making sure that these things are being executed upon a way that goes back to the value behind what I would call the position? The law is the position, but what was the value behind that? And that's really tricky. And so all these things, when you look at them, what's going to work is the thing that honestly creates lower barriers to entry, meaning, lower barriers to entry, access to capital, and you can kind of one-off it with, we'll do this with these licenses or do other things, but it's everyone's tried to execute. I think it's been relatively limited where there's been really good execution, but I'm hopeful that we can keep that going. When it comes to the expungement things and other things you mentioned, look, we're going to push for whatever pardons or anything we can do at the presidential level. We're going to do that at every gubernatorial level. We're going to work with attorneys general to help push this forward. We're going to work with tech companies that can help us make it easier for governors to do this. Colorado, we're going to change it from 1 ounce to 2 ounces so we can get more people expunged. But it's honestly one of the most important things is having forums where people can talk about these ideas, what's working, what's not working. Because if you're just reading about it in the paper, no matter how good the coverage is, it's hard to know what's actually happening.
Okay, Christian, thank you. And on behalf of all the folks on the Zoom call, good luck with the Cannabis Trade Federation. And thank you so much for your time here today. We really appreciate that.
It's my pleasure and great work, everyone. So proud of you. Can't wait to hear more and follow the successes here. So thanks so much.
We divided today's conversation into 4 segments: legislative, industry, business, community, and social equity. And part of trying to pull in all of these folks is that I'm not trying to resolve anything today. I'm not trying to look but so far down the road. What I'm really interested in is trying to get us to value add each other's perspectives. To not dismiss anybody, to not think that anything is inappropriate, to figure out where the positive growth opportunities, where are the access points, where are the awareness points for opportunity. And so I want to just make sure we do that. And so with that, our first panel is a legislative panel, and I've invited Senator Scutari, Assemblyman Holly, Assemblyman Zwicker, Mayor Garciora, and the Honorable Mercer County Commissioner, Sam Frisbee. And so if you folks are on the call, please step forward. And Senator Scutari, we're going to start with you first, if you don't mind. Will you,
Sure.
you take a few minutes and tell us your intent? What is it that you wanted to happen here? What is it that you saw? Us legislative guys know that the language is there, but it's always the intent that really matters. Tell us your intent, sir.
Well, when I started this long road, maybe 15 years ago, it was to end the senseless arrests for a product that I saw less dangerous than alcohol. The thing that gets me is hypocrisy. I hated the hypocrisy. And so I saw the senseless arrest, the senseless abuse of the criminal justice system, and I wanted to see if we could stop it. And when I first introduced the very concept of legalizing marijuana at any level in New Jersey, I was almost laughed out of the legislature. So along the way, I picked up partners, and Mayor Gutierrez was one of my first partners in 2009. We were able to successfully get medical marijuana legalized in New Jersey. And then we had many, many years where it just kind of languished under a Republican administration who really didn't want to deal with the legalization of marijuana for any reason. So that was really my number one goal, was to try to end the senseless interaction in the criminal justice system for so many people. And that was my motivating factor. It just was a complete and utter failure. I think the drug laws in New Jersey and in this country is just a complete and utter failure, a waste of taxpayer dollars, a waste of opportunity, a waste of lives. People's lives getting destroyed over senseless arrests and incarceration for a product that's not only naturally occurring, but is far less dangerous than the substances we already allow to be legalized, such as tobacco and alcohol. So that was my main focus in the beginning.
Okay. Does yesterday's positive vote make you feel any way about what's going on?
I'm happy we finally got it done. I can tell you that I probably had some doubts at some point in time that I'd be able to get it done. And if you followed the vote, I mean, 67% of New Jerseyans voted to support it, and yet it barely passed the legislature. So I guess people could have individual problems with what was contained in the bill, but really there's just a lot of people that can't wrap their head around the fact that this is going to be a legal substance, and they just can't fathom that it is. And that's on both sides of the aisle in some ways. So it's going to take a while. I mean, I can't imagine what police officers are thinking today. Like, oh my God, we're not going to be able to arrest people. We're not going to be able to close roads down because we stopped somebody with a tiny little bit of marijuana in their car. So it's the beginning. It's not the end. This is just the beginning of righting the wrongs that have gone on for over 100 years.
Assemblyman Holly, you on the call?
Yes, I am. Thank you, John. How are you?
Good, good. Give me your perspective. What is the Black legislator saying? What is the Black community saying from an elected perspective on the legislation?
I mean, we're feeling pretty good about all the accomplishments that we were able to insert into the bill. We had a singular focus on social justice and social equity. As you know, expungements and virtual expungements was always a part of our quest in this whole particular policy matter, but it was also about reinvestments back into our communities, especially our impacted communities that have been hardest hit on the war on drugs. And also, you know, we wanted opportunities for licenses. You know, oftentimes African Americans, Latinos can't compete with the big conglomerates that are out there that are going to come up and take over. We have no ill will towards those individuals who have the ability to gain capital, but we would like to participate as well. And so with the partnership with Senator Scutari and the Senate and the members of the Legislative Black Caucus and our speaker and other members of the Assembly, you know, we all were very much in tune of being on the same page that we had to create some level of relief for one, but also the opportunity aspect of it. And, you know, John, you've been following this for a very long time with us from state to state. And I think that New Jersey is going to have a real good model for the other states to follow. And as you know, they've already started to pick away at some of our components now as we've been working it out over the last several years. Illinois, we've talked to the Senate president and the Senate majority leader over there plenty of times, John, and California and Colorado. So I think our social justice and our social equity, while it's not 100%, and I think that, you know, I tell my members in the Assembly all the time that we're going to revisit this at some point, even while the commission is still hammering down the regs, because there's just going to be things that come up. And we're just going to have to just tighten and tweak some things. But I think that where we started and all the help and partnership and the debate and dialogue, I think we got a pretty good model that we could be all very proud of. I mean, a lot of effort has been put into this, both Senate and the Assembly and the community in itself. I mean, it's been a long journey, some up days, some down days, some all around days, but I think we have a really good product. And I think that while we had heated debates here and there, I just think that it was in the best interest of who we all wanted to represent in this bill. And I think that it's in this bill.
Thank you. Andrew, are you there?
I'm here, John. Hi.
Give me, you were there when the medical piece was passed. Give me your take on what this new legislation means from your perspective.
Yeah, and first of all, I have to give a huge shout out to Assemblyman Holly, Senator Scutari, Assemblyman Quijano. I mean, there's just so many people that have been working on this for so long to get to where we got yesterday, as both previous speakers talked about, is really a huge accomplishment. And we all understand that there's more work to be done. You know, going back a couple of years to medicinal marijuana, it was about what has been known about this particular plant for so long, that it is a place where people can find relief from pain, from anxiety, from a variety of different afflictions, and that it was being treated wrongly. People are being treated wrongly at the federal level, and it was up to New Jersey to do something about it, as we've seen other states do, and making sure that we got that in place, I think was also key because, and I see in some of the chat people talking about medicinal as well, it put the infrastructure, at least the root of the infrastructure in place so that as we move into the next year, we can ideally get licenses out, get product up, moving the amount of product that we're producing and getting ready for dispensaries as quickly as possible. And, both Assemblyman Holly and Senator Scutari talked about the need to make sure that we get licenses into the hands of those who've been excluded by this process. And we have a lot of work to do to make sure that happens, along with the expungement piece of this is the economic development and the jobs piece of this. So there's just been so many people who have been involved. I was proud to vote for the legislation yesterday, and anything I could have done in the little pieces that I did to try to push the medical piece forward was proud to do. But this is the beginning. There's a lot to do to make sure we get it right next year.
Okay. I've heard you and both you and Jamel, and the Assemblyman and the Senator talk about next year. Does that imply that what we've done is made some concessions that we think were in the best interest of the industry to move forward and then be able to go back and to reframe, recapture some of the issues that weren't in the initial legislation?
I mean, yeah, when you go through the legislative process, I think there are components that you would want to see. There's some components that, you would like to be inserted into the bill, but it's a balancing act, right? We pushed it to the voters, so we had a timeline. And when you have a timeline, I think time sometimes is up against you when you want to be a little bit more creative. But I think that what we have and what we settled on and what we have right now is a step that we all can live with. And I believe that next year and the year after, we will be doing some tweaking. You still have to deal with the cultivators and, that cap and, some of the other, homegrown has come up. Nick could tell you they wanted us to do homegrown in this bill, but from a legislative perspective, I don't think any of us could wrap our hands around the homegrown component right now because of the complexity of the bill and the decrim bill. So I foresee us revisiting this next year on some tweaks, on some areas that we weren't able to get into this bill as we have it now. But I think it's a pretty good model to start with.
Okay. Mayor Garcia, supposedly, or not supposedly, but 70% of the tax revenue is supposed to go to communities that have been adversely impacted by the war on drugs. Trenton should be one of those communities. What is your thoughts, having been in the legislature, having watched the legislation move forward up and down over years, and now being a mayor of the capital city? What's your thought about the impact that the legislation could have on a city like Trenton?
We're going to need that alone to create the parking lot for Weedman's business. It is going to have a tremendous impact on urban cities. We're always strapped before cash, especially in the capital city, where we're always holding our hands up to the state to give us the compensation that we deserve. But this is a legislature this year that's going to be known for crisis and opportunity. The pandemic and how they adequately addressed the pandemic, but also created opportunity. And this is going to create real economic opportunities for the city of Trenton. We're really excited about groups such as Curio coming up from Baltimore and setting up base on Enterprise Avenue and actually being a regional distributor for medical marijuana. That's going to create real jobs for our youth, and whether it's production, whether it's growing, whether it's dispensary, there's going to be some real opportunities, and opportunities also to develop our downtown, make it a viable place where people want to come and visit. And there could be a real pot tourism for the capital city. We're right across a bridge from Pennsylvania. And while we're still ahead of the curve with New York, Delaware, and Pennsylvania, we're going to have a big influx of marijuana tourists, just like they do in Denver, just like they do in Seattle and the like. So there's some real opportunities for the city. We look forward to it. I think the expungement piece is really important. And I agree with Weedman that it should even go up to higher levels, so to speak, without using the pun, because the drug dealers of the past have more knowledge than the corporate giants that are just coming at this with money. So all our citizens in urban areas deserve to be part of the new green economy, and the expungement piece will be really important for that.
You know, I think that's a very important piece. One of the things that I mentioned, the delivery piece that was going on in Massachusetts, but one of the things that are happening in Colorado is that they're dealing with not only delivery, but also consumption lounges, what I think New Jersey Weedman has, that I'm not sure if he's called it that or whoever's called it that, and we'll talk about that a little later in the conversation, but he's way ahead of where a whole lot of the country is relative to what's happening. And so I think you're right about trying to make sure that people who have experiences in the area, and that's why I mentioned Tracy and even Jamel, once you have folks who have somebody or something in your life that has been impacted through the war on drugs, you got a story to tell. There's a message that you can share. And I think that it's very important that we get those folks involved. You know, for example, with the Cannabis Regulatory Commission, I don't think it ought to be all just industry folks. I think there ought to be some social equity people in that dynamic who have some experiences that they can bring to the table. And so I appreciate you bringing that up. You know, Sam, you're our host today, but one of the concerns that I have, and I'm not sure if Senator Scutari or one of the assemblymen can speak to it, but I'd like you to speak to it. As I understood the legislation, the 70% of the tax dollars were supposed to go into cities that were impacted by the war on drugs. Yet, I'm not sure if it's clear how that money will go there, going directly to them, i.e. to the municipalities, or does it have to, in some cases, like some dollars in the state, be it federal or other, go to the county commissioners, and then they make some determination about how that money is utilized. Is that clear yet, or do you know?
So I'm not sure, and I'm not clear on if that has been clearly stated. But what I can say is that I think that it's important that county government has a role to play in this process. You know, we keep hearing the discussion about the war on drugs, and the war on drugs created a challenge, especially for Black and brown communities. Dr. King said that peace is not the absence of tension, but it's the presence of justice. And I'm going to take a little bit of liberty to say that it's the presence of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in the process. If we're going to talk about, you know, moving us forward economically, then we have to make sure that people have a seat at the table. And many times with you know, this particular industry, as I've been watching it, you know, Black and brown people very easily can be priced out of the process. And so we have to begin to figure out ways to make sure that money gets through county government and that we can create opportunities for people if they want to build businesses like consumption lounges, or they want to have a shot at some of the larger money to get involved at a larger level. But that is not going to happen unless we create some opportunities. You know, we look at up in Newark, they've done some really good stuff at the county level in terms of how they've engaged their banks to ensure that their banks are supporting people in their communities. County government can do a lot if that money is coming through and we're thinking about it in a way that is equitable to our communities.
Okay. Anybody in this legislative group, can you respond to the question of you know, once we get the 70% of the tax revenues into these local municipalities, and mayors and county commissioners have identified either local issues, be it education, be it public safety, be it business development, whatever it may be, are we being authentic with them if in fact 1 year later we're saying, let's look at it and then let's go back to the voters? Anybody comment on that?
What we have is,
I'm sorry.
you can go, Senator. You can go, Senator.
First, I was remiss. I didn't thank Assemblyman Holly and Assemblywoman Key.
His mute is on. Yeah, your mute is on, Nick.
Okay, sorry about that. I first, before I get to the question is, are we being disingenuous? The answer is, if we don't constitutionally mandate it, then it can go away. It can go away every year. Any bill that we pass can be overruled by another bill, and the budget document is the overriding budget document. So if we want to ensure that the funding goes in a specific area for social equity programming and social justice initiatives, then that's the only way to do it. And I want to thank Assemblyman Holly and Assemblywoman Quijano and Assemblyman Zwicker for helping me in this effort, because it was a lonely road for a long time. And let me tell you, nothing's perfect. I'm not suggesting this bill is perfect, but it's pretty good. And it was hard. It barely passed. And despite all our best efforts and the years of struggle to try to get this done. So yeah, sure, there may be some shortcomings and we can do more. And I think as time goes on, we'll improve upon it. And there'll be other pieces of legislation to work on, some of the things that you'll continue to talk about. But you know, there was a lot to work on.
Okay. Jamil? Senator Holly, you want to comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say the 70% is in perpetuity every year constitutionally, and then we also have a cultivation tax that we call it social equity tax, that will go into a special social equity fund for those particular programs that we've outlined, job training programs, reentry programs, all of the programs that, like the Trentons and like the Elizabeths and like the Norths, that we have those one-on-one approach, you know, nonprofits that could help, you know, with funding to help service a lot of the impacted individuals and the families in those impacted communities. There's been some debate and dialogue about the constitutional amendment on next year's ballot. I mean, I think there's some pushback in the Assembly because, you know, we don't feel that the community as a whole in New Jersey would vote in favor of such a ballot referendum, knowing that these funds would go back to these impacted communities. So that's why we were really aggressive and at least trying to get it statutorily done into this bill, so that we at least have some protections through our budget process. But I don't know, you know, there's been some mixed reviews about the constitutional amendment. That's an ongoing discussion, but, you know, we were really concerned about just getting something into this bill now that at least started that process. But it's in there, it's statutorily, it's perpetuity. So we're hoping that with all our colleagues who are not representing minority communities will help support us as well during the budget process to ensure that these dollars get back into the community.
That's a good segue into Andrew, our colleagues who don't represent the minority community, but who are sensitive to the issue. Andrew, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, this is not simply about who I represent. This is a issue about everyone in New Jersey. This is a genuine social justice issue. This is, you know, as we heard from both Solomon Holly and Senator Scutari, you know, a long time coming. I think, you know, Jamel's right in terms of it's there in the legislation, but Senator Scutari got right to the heart of it, which is we see this every year. There is budgetary pressure to take money, and we know as this industry gets geared up, the amount of money is going to go to quite large sums, hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's just going to be dangling there to be plucked, and pressure for so many different reasons. And so it is beholden upon all of the legislature to ensure that the money goes to where it is intended to go. And if we need to do another amendment, I agree, we'll have to get the language just right. But if we don't, I just worry there'll be enormous pressure on that. And so the time is right to get that done and get it done soon. I worry if we go too far down the road, we're going to see tax revenue go up. We're going to see the industry start to mature. And then we're going to see lots of people who are going to say, hey, I want a piece of that new pie of money. So we've got to get this right, and we've got to do that soon.
You know, that's an interesting perspective. Do you want to comment on that as well, Senator, in terms of getting it right? Senator Scutari, did you want to speak on getting it right? All right, then I'm going to take a liberty here. I see one of my colleagues on the call, who's also a CCABC founder, former Mayor Trent. Douglas, you got something you want to share relative to the legislation and what you see?
Yeah, well, first I want to, thank you, John. As soon as I start speaking, the dogs bark. I want to thank you for your leadership with this issue throughout the country, but also bringing it to the attention of all the good folks in New Jersey in this forum. Again, to Senator Scutari, I was testified at his hearing Monday. He's done an outstanding job. I commend him. He worked very hard, and he had the right reasons for pushing this, and he didn't let perfect be the enemy of good. And I think we have to be very careful that we don't let that happen. I want to thank Senator Singleton, too, who pushed an amendment, which I know that my colleague, Gerald Registry, will talk about around 5:15 about how we can get money through a fund to minorities, women, and disabled veterans to be able to have licenses, help them get licenses, but also to train them and provide the money for them to do it. And we'll talk about that later. Also, Assemblywoman Verlina Reynolds Jackson, who's dropped this bill on the Assembly side with the amendment. And so I want to thank everybody that's doing this. And I really want to thank you for educating these people. There's a lot to learn about this issue. I've been with Curio, which Mayor Gussier talked about. Hopefully, if we get a license in the second round, whenever that'll be, we're going to put a $60 million facility on Enterprise Avenue, which will employ over 200 people, paying full taxes, no pilots. But I'm also a partner in the fund. And this fund that we are looking at, and Mike Bronfein was very insistent that African Americans, minorities, women, disabled veterans, that they be able to create wealth by owning dispensaries. And so this amendment in the bill that Senator Singleton and Assemblyman Holly and others are supportive, and the Black Caucus is supportive of, will be an avenue, and it's in this bill, for a person in this category that doesn't have the funds. And let's face it, no one has $400,000, $500,000, and banks are not going to lend it to you. This fund will do that. They will own it. The fund won't own it. We just want them to be able to learn how to do the business, be successful, and pay the fund back. And it is one avenue of helping that group of people, African Americans, minorities, disabled vets, to be able to take advantage of this as dispensary operators. But I think this is very helpful. And then we're going to continue to have more dialogue. I know, being a former mayor, and I know Mayor Gus would agree, I'd like whatever money's coming to go direct to the cities, not go to the county or the state, right to the cities. And I know that's going to be a battle, but I think it's one worth having. But I thank you again for the opportunity. And like I said, Jarrell Registry will talk more specifically about this amendment that was put in S-2875 by Senator Singleton and supported by Assemblywoman Verlina Reynolds Jackson and Jamel Holly and Assemblyman Bergen, who's a Republican.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
I have a question.
Excuse me, there's no question here. If you got a question, you come into the chat room. And Sam, there's a person on here, please mute them. Thank you. that's a good segue. And so let me thank all of you who have been part of the legislative piece, and we're going to go right into the industry business perspective. And our first speaker in the industry business perspective is the president of the New Jersey Cannabis Association, the new president. So Ed, give us your perspective on the legislation and what do you think it means to the industry?
Thanks so much. And again, congratulations to all the honorees and welcome everyone. You know, the legislation, as many have said, creates the framework for future regulation. From the New Jersey cannabis business perspective, early in our history, 4 years ago, the Cannabis Business Association had the challenge of balancing the social justice conversation along with just making sure that people in the state knew that cannabis was in fact a legitimate industry. So fast forward to my ascension and taking the helm of the Cannabis Business Association, and where I sit and using the legislation as a backdrop is now we get to say that the social justice, economic parity conversation is not mutually exclusive from the commerce conversation. For far too long, many people segregated the conversation. And so what we ended up doing was in essence, kind of dividing our community, dividing this group that's on the phone. So what I'm encouraging right now is that we focus now, and now that we've got this legalization platform from which we can launch, now we get to say things like, let's look at how we stand up business, all businesses. How do we get to stand up minority businesses? How do we get to stand up those businesses adequately, give them the right resources at the right pace so that they can become part of the industry? What we do know is that when we get the industry right, and as it evolves over time, it's going to benefit the economics of the state of New Jersey. So when we get to stand up minority businesses, it's great for the state of New Jersey. When we make sure that businesses are properly vetted and that there's good competition and that we do away with application processes that arbitrarily assign points and give licenses to arbitrary groups and allow people to submit applications that get graded on merit, but not through a point system, and actually let the county commissioners, let the mayors do what they do best, what they've been doing for a couple of 100 years, and that is zone, plan, and actually place business. This is what the Cannabis Business Association is all about. So kind of speaking as the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, this is what this bill does. And so by creating, again, some of the platform that the CRC, the Cannabis Regulatory Commission, will undertake, we will have this conversation once again. Again, I can't say enough about Senator Scutari and the members of the Assembly, Assemblyman Hawley, Assemblyman Zwicker, Assemblywoman Quijano, for lending an ear to getting this started. So that, John, is where, that is the benefit of having the legislation. And the benefit of having this conversation is getting to say just what I've said.
All right, thank you. John Harmon, U.S. Chamber of Commerce and Equality of Opportunity Task Force, member and president, African American Chamber of Commerce in New Jersey. You've looked at these social equity issues. You've looked at these business opportunity. You've looked at these access issues. Different than in the cannabis industry, but it's applicable across the board. And so from a business perspective, how do you see this helping Black businesses, folks who want to get into, Black people who want to get into the business? How can the African American Chamber play a role from your perspective in this whole engagement in the industry?
Well, John, thank you, and I thank all the participants today, particularly the legislators who went out on the line and try to get this done against a a huge backdrop of opposition. I potentially see this as a win-win if, in fact, we get the equity piece right. And so, as an advocate for the over 80,000 Black businesses in New Jersey and 1.1 million Black residents, we see this as an opportunity to participate in this new industry. We have the highest poverty, highest unemployment, and it all have been adversely affected mostly by the mass incarceration. So our role from the chamber, we want to, as a vanguard for the Black business community, is to engage the legislators, engage community stakeholders to ensure that we're included in all areas of this industry. So that's hopefully that's our role. Mayor Palmer talked about potential job opportunities, potential contracting opportunities. This could be transformational for a city like Trenton, which is one of the nation's former industrial giants. If we can leverage the opportunities that could spur from this new industry, it could be a potential game changer, not only for Trenton, but around the country.
You know, John,
I'm sorry.
They say, John, that by 2024, this will be, in this country, a $50 billion business. In Colorado, in the last 8 years, it is a $10 billion industry. What could that mean, that type of turnaround? What do you think that could mean from a business perspective as you talk about generational wealth?
Well, it could be transformational, John. It was interesting, the numbers that you've just articulated versus the $126 million that they're projecting as revenue. There's a big gap between your numbers and their numbers, but nonetheless, this could be a huge pathway to creating wealth. Black net worth in New Jersey is about $5,900 versus whites at $309,000. So our ability to access these opportunities in all areas in an equitable way could be transformational, could potentially be that wealth creator. So that's what we're going to be advocating for day in and day out. We have a number of members that are interested, a number of members that have taken steps to be a part of this, and we want to encourage others to do so.
Susanna Short, co-founder of New Jersey Cannabis Trade Association. Your thoughts on what the industry legalization piece means for the industry from where you sit?
Sure, thanks, John, and thanks for your leadership on this issue and bringing us all together, hosting this event and including me in this panel in particular. So as you said, I'm one of the founders of the New Jersey Cannabis Trade Association. We've got a few associations in the state. Here, this one is comprised just of the current 12 ATCs. And really, when we look at it, there's not much light between the position of the current ATCs and that of some other advocacy groups that maybe are more exclusively focused on that social justice narrative. As we have our conversations as ATCs, we've really been focused a lot on the patient justice issues, right? So, for example, home grow for patients is something that the ATCs are in support of. And that cultivation tax that's floating around, ATCs have been very clearly opposed. A big part of the reason for that is that cost, we believe, is going to be passed on to patients, right? If it's taxed too early in the supply chain, how do you differentiate a product at that point, whether it's going to a patient or to an adult use consumer at the end? So we've really been focused on the patient justice issues. And we also think that we know the industry is going to look quite different, a year from now, 18 months from now than it does at this moment. And we welcome that. We think that's a good thing because we ultimately want a diverse, equitable, inclusive industry that is viable, that the state says we need to keep around, right? This is something that is good for our state. We want businesses of all types to be able to succeed, all sizes to be able to succeed, a marketplace that attracts investment for businesses of all sizes. So going back to that cultivation tax, for example, we don't like it because we think it's hard to differentiate patient and adult use consumer products, but it's arguably easier for a vertically integrated operator to absorb that cultivation tax because we can kind of recapture it later in the margins, right? But for a standalone micro business cultivator that's going to be subject to that tax, that's even worse for them. So we really think there's a lot less light between our positions than might be made out to seem. Like there's this is the industry, and then there's other people who want to get in, who are so different or have such different policy provisions. I myself have tried to make a play for ownership in this industry, and I don't own any of these ATCs. I work with them, work for them. So on a personal level, I have certain policy goals that I'd like to see. But aside from that, there's public policy constructs that can really improve the industry from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective. And whether we see that through cleanup bills or some standalone legislation, we really have our eyes on Senator Singleton's S-2875. We think there can be more done to allow flexibility within the micro business construct. We think there's opportunities for partnerships that can create, incentives for success when businesses of different sizes work together. And we like the goal of the cultivation tax to raise funds for social equity. That we're not opposed to. We just want to shift where that is captured, and also potentially consider other constructs to develop that money earlier, right? Because that cultivation tax isn't supposed to go into effect until later down the road, as long as there's no constitutional roadblocks there. And if we're going to try to raise funds for social equity type businesses, 18 months down the road is when we start doing that. That's too late. There needs to be funds available out of the gate to support that type of development in our industry. And so there's ways like what they've done in Illinois with the +1, where someone who has a existing retail license can pay hundreds of thousands of dollars into a pot to pick up another, and that hundreds of thousands of dollars goes right to a business development fund. It's being done in other states successfully, and we think it's a real solution that can, help to get at a mutual policy goal. So ultimately, we're grateful for all the work that's been done in the legislature, that's been done by advocates, been done by, industry to get us to this moment. We know it's not the end of the road, and we really hope that, this process will be collaborative going forward. We'll see there is common ground, among the various stakeholders, and that equity needs to be at the center of everyone's advocacy efforts at this point.
Thank you, Suzanne. I appreciate that. Our next speaker is Marianne Bays from the New Jersey Cannabis Trade Association, the Vice President. Marianne, are you there?
Yes, I am.
I have a specific question for you.
Yes.
Did we have to wait on legislation here for social equity to happen in the industry? Could we have, for example, and I raised this issue in Colorado, I brought together the Black Chamber and MIG, Marijuana Industry Group, and members of LEADS, which is the major Colorado industry players. And one of the things that we did was I felt that we were being disingenuous because everybody was on hold waiting for legislation to come forward. And I felt that what we could do is get a list of what the industry needed in terms of security, printing, all those types of ancillary types of things, and then go to the Black Chamber and say, who do you have in the chamber that has these types of businesses, skills that we can then match up? So my question is, could we have done that here in New Jersey?
John, certainly I believe that we could have. What we did instead was created a program that was so small that we really couldn't have generated those kinds of support business activities. There's only 6 licensed businesses here for the longest time.
It's hard. I have a difficult time hearing you a little bit there.
Oh, okay, let me see. The difficulty would have been that we only had 6 operating businesses. Today we have 11, I think. And that doesn't really create the force that we need in order to activate that kind of thing. So yes, we certainly could have, but it would have been really tiny. Everyone has been waiting for the expansion of the medical program in order to start moving things forward. And we've still not actually accomplished that. So we don't yet have a strong, sustainable industry here. That's what I think our challenge is moving ahead. And to do that, we've got to get variety in the mix. We can't have all out-of-state, multi-state operators running this. We'll never get the competition that is needed in order to generate this stability in the industry and the ability to meet the needs of the public. So we've kind of built a model here that's been so exclusive that it held us back. I think Ed DeVoe may have mentioned that we've got to take a look at what we've been doing in competition for licenses. By limiting the number of licenses, we have created these fierce competitions where, in general, the bigger companies already operating outside win. Now we're beginning to carve out in this next, round, and we could have started earlier, recognizing that there's some types of businesses that are easier for local entrepreneurs to get into. But we have to be careful here because I keep seeing efforts to do that, which focus on the low-hanging fruit. Let's say, a dispensary's got less capital intensity to start it up. But if we size that dispensary as, in terms of square footage and the amount of money that it can make, and say only this size is what's available to social equity applicants, and we don't give them a path to become the big business that they might be otherwise become, we're hampering them still. The evaluation processes I want to go back to, because we've done some things here in New Jersey that drove me crazy. In the 2018 action, one of the evaluation criteria was financial stability. Now, in order to show that, what the state was looking for was your financials from the previous year, your tax returns from the previous year. So how is a local entrepreneur who wants to start a business gonna do it if you evaluate people based on that? So we've got some barriers we've built, and we haven't been thinking creatively, but there are a lot of support businesses that we could be working with. And one of the things that I think that is only beginning to be talked about as seriously as we need to right now is the education and support of the local entrepreneurs, giving them the tools that they need in order to successfully compete. Because even if there isn't an evaluation process up front that knocks people back, the competition and the work in the industry, the real world, can be fierce, and people are going to need support in order to get over the hump and get operating sustainable businesses.
Okay, thank you. Part
John,
of the,
I know you.
Excuse
John,
me. Excuse me. We go to the chat room. If you want to reach me, you come through the chat room. All right. Our next speaker is Tara Masu, who's the CEO of Tara Masu LLC and Blazing Bakery. Tara, would you give us your perspective on how you see the industry may be impacting a small business?
Absolutely. That's been something I've been very passionate about right from the start. I was very involved in the creation of the micro license and the social equity piece in the Jay Koenig law. And a lot of that has been moved into the current legislation, which I am ecstatic about. I do want to see what other people have stated, though, which is a removal on caps and merit-based licenses, because we create these competitions that are definitely biased towards out-of-state companies and Canadian companies even. So the analogy I like to give is if you want to open a restaurant and you had to have 20 other restaurants before they would qualify you, the only place we would have is Olive Garden and Applebee's, and you would never have that great little Italian restaurant down the street. So things like the micro and just creating opportunities are so important. And, I've been doing this for over a decade now in New Jersey, and this is really something I've just put my heart and soul into. And, there's some people on this call, Weedman was around back then, a lot of people who were around, and, we didn't connect. But in yeah, it was kind of like no one cared. Like we would march in the street and it just didn't matter. We were the other. And then in 2018, I really was fortunate enough to see this shift where politically people started really caring in a real way. And that's when I really transitioned from being a businesswoman to being a ardent activist in New Jersey. And I don't want to see women left behind because that's really, there's not a lot of voices representing us. And the bias I've received in the past decade, and sadly still continue to receive, has really been notable that over 90% of venture capital in cannabis goes to men. And I mean, I have stories of when I used to go to a convention and there'd be 150 booths and I'd be the only woman. And then people would come up to me and say, the guy who I would hire to help maybe unload boxes would look past me and say, can I speak to your manager? Because they couldn't fathom that a woman was running a cannabis company back then. So I'm proud of the shift, but we're definitely not out of the woods yet. So yeah, it's and certainly the work I've been able to do with the NJCBA has been remarkable. The relationships with, obviously, thank you so much to Senator Scutari, Assemblyman Holly and Zwicker, this and so many people in the legislature who have been incredibly revolutionized the way some people see cannabis. And I've had a lot of opportunities to leave the state and to, I've been in the edibles business for 10 years. I could have went to California, Colorado, and people quite frankly asked me why I was staying in New Jersey. And it's because I believed in my state and I wanted to see us get this done here the right way. And I think all the people on this Zoom right now and a lot of others who, propped us up were really the reason. And I got very emotional when this passed. And I continue to be immensely proud of my state and everyone who made this happen.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments. Faye Coleman, small businesswoman, southern part of the state. You have some thoughts on what the legislation means to you and your business?
I do. I really just want to thank everybody for their time today. And I'm very humbled to be recognized with such esteemed leaders in the industry within our state. We came into this industry in 2018, and it's been interesting at the least to see the progress within the state. Of course, more work to be done, but the progress nonetheless. I heard Christian talk about implementation and the need to lower the barriers to entry. And I believe that's going to start getting out of the gates with an effective application process. It comes down to tactics here. And I also heard Assemblyman Holly speak very clearly about limits on cultivation and how we need to focus on that. And I appreciate what the Black Caucus has done in terms of the focus on policy, which is looking to drive change for a more inclusive participation, which is what it gets down to. John, you've been talking about equity. Everybody has mentioned equity in some form or fashion, but equity really equals inclusion, and that we all must be educated and aligned on what equity means. And I think once we have that alignment, we'll all be more so on the same page in terms of what we need to value and move forward in this industry and what really matters. We are operators in this business, and as Tiramisu has elated or communicated very effectively is some of the barriers that have limited her and myself as women in this industry, and myself, of course, as a minority in this industry. But there are many barriers that are set up for us, but I would say not just for us, for everyone. And I'm going to go back to the application process for a second, because I think, Tiramisu, I heard you talk about it a little bit earlier, but the disqualification protocols within the application process, we have to eliminate that. We have to get beyond that. It can't be just merit-based. It has to be more meeting the requirements based, much like we would if a pharmacist was getting a license, no different than that. There's many opportunities here, but also the capital requirements are so extensive. How do we focus on that? How do we limit? How do we minimize the resources that we need to bring to the table? How do we educate those in terms of what resources that are out there that can help us improve on our opportunities to leverage the opportunity to become successful and acquire a license? What does that look like right now?
Well, hold on, Faye, hold on. When you talk about these opportunities, you talk about the support. And several other states, they're creating technical assistance funds. They're creating ordinances to make sure that those folks who get into the industry, who come from the war on drugs, who don't have the legal background, don't have the accounting background, do get the technical assistance that is necessary. Is that what this PSA that you're pushing right now, this public service announcement is for, that technical assistance?
It is. It's that type of assistance, but it is even more comprehensive than that. You well know, John, as does everyone on this call, that Colorado, Oregon, and many other states have done a phenomenal job in really investing in what equity means from an education to a resource standpoint, to a financial, the financial wherewithal to move forward within this industry. And I think New Jersey is at the front end of that. And if we can understand and take license from some of the other states that have gone before us, I think we can adopt some of that and put that within our own state and be successful with it. But we have to be open to those. You know, I look at states like Oklahoma, where we've got 9,000 licenses and 800 million in revenue, or Colorado with 3,000 licenses and 1.75 billion in revenue. You know, their protocols for acquiring a license are very different from ours. You know, what's the harm in looking at those more firmly and adopting some of that language and protocols to move that forward? That's an effective way and effective strategies in terms of how we win. So, you know, as I look at it, you know, I look at that, but you also have to look at various organizations. The Cannabis Regulators of Color Coalition, they offer support in providing inclusive solutions for underserved communities and minority businesses. And then I was also very encouraged today to hear Christian talk about some of the objectives with the Cannabis Trade Federation. So there are many organizations that are out there that we can leverage to help ourselves move forward in this industry. But it does start with policy. And hearing Assemblyman Hawley talk about some of the things that are happening on behalf of what the Black Caucus had put forward is very encouraging for me, because as Pure Genesis looks to move forward in this industry, we have to lower those barriers so that we can move forward, because we consider ourselves a ready now cannabis business. And by that, I mean, we have the real estate, we have the approvals, and we have the application ready to go. What we need is the opportunity. So I'm excited. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, so Susanna Short, you're on this particular conversation. How do we, Faye is doing this work, yet are all of the 11 or 12 Cannabis Trade Federation members all Anglo? And is there a place for Faye? Matter of fact, is there a place for Weedman in the New Jersey Cannabis Trade Association? I mean, these are folks who are not necessarily social equity applicants because they've been doing the work, but could be social equity applicants. And so from the trade association, is there a way to be able to bring them in without making it too prohibitive if they're interested? And they'll tell me here in a minute. Suzanne?
Sure, thanks for the question. So I think that there's really not just current ATCs and then social equity applicants, right? As we look to the future of this industry, we're going to have small businesses, large businesses, vertically integrated, standalone, micro businesses, et cetera. The Cannabis Trade Association was founded to represent whoever holds a permit in the state. And so we absolutely hope that as this industry diversifies for different types of licenses, that our membership will be expanded simply because the architecture, you know, and the representation in this industry will be expanded as well.
John, can I respond to that?
I do, yes.
Sure, thank you. And I appreciate those comments, Susanna, because, you know, one of the reasons why we diversified our business is because of some of the challenges and the high barriers we have to entry on the cannabis side of acquiring a license. You know, we're multi-state hemp operators. We're launching a beverage, a CBD beverage in the first quarter of 2021. We're doing research with Rowan University, and we have education and business consulting that we're doing. But we did all of that because of the high barriers to come into this industry on the cannabis side. So it's, you know, for us, it's exciting to see where we've been able to go, but we still have a long way to go as it relates to the cannabis community and acquiring a license. So thank you for that.
I agree with you. And Faye, I want to say, you paid me one of the nicest compliments of anybody ever in my life. I don't remember, we were in Assemblyman Holly's office in the waiting room, and you said something about what I was wearing. I looked good, and you made me feel really good. You know, you are just like a beacon of light, and you're professional, you know, and so you really will be an asset to our industry as a license holder. I hope that day comes sooner rather than later. And I hope to be part of an association with you that represents a license holder that includes you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
So Ed, anything last word in the business section that you want to leave us with?
I think everyone was right on point. You know, when you think about this industry, it is so diverse, and the needs, the wants, the desires, the breadth of anything that has to occur from a regulatory standpoint, as you've heard, has got to be broad. So number one, it's excellent that you have pulled us all together. Two, do recognize the diversity of interests and of positions. And thirdly, it's a matter of patience, because at some point, the regulatory body has to address all of these concerns, and that's going to be tough. There's one thing that I learned in the military. If you're not a leader, you're right 100% of the time. So when you look at what's being discussed here, there's got to be moments where we're going to get frustrated, and clearly it's just going to have to be a matter of patience, because everyone's concerns will have to be addressed at some point. And lastly, John, if I may, look, if you haven't been to Lefty and Jim's tent during a session day, you have missed out on something.
Okay. John Norman, any last words? John Harmon, any last words?
I was so locked in on Ed's comments and Faye, I tell you, I just want to say that Black people in New Jersey just want to be treated fairly. They want to have access to a level playing field. They want equitable participation in all sectors of New Jersey's economy. And for years, it's been very elusive here in the state. And it's just time for us to level set on the realities that, notwithstanding all our contributions to the state, Blacks are still economically in a pretty bad spot. And so we see this as an opportunity to right a long-term systemic societal wrong. And we have men and women that have put real capital at risk, real intellectual capacity at risk, and we just want to get ours. I think that's what it comes down to. So the conversation has been great. We're going to continue to advocate as best we can. We love the state, but the state sometimes has not loved us. So we're encouraged. We're going to press forward, and hopefully, as this process moves down the line, it's a little more equitable for those who want to participate in this new economy. John, thank you for hosting. Thank you for the recognition. And we're going to do our best to keep hope alive in our state.
Thank you. So from a business perspective, there's a couple points of view that we got a long way to go, points of view that Black businesses are still at the bottom of the well. And so now we'll get a community perspective. And so one of my good friends that I've known from, leading Reed towards victory as mayor, working in the city of Trenton, has been Leo Bridgewater, a young man who I have a great deal of affection for, who, like New Jersey Weed Man, is a beacon of light. And so Leo, you and I have been talking for weeks on this, for years on this. You've been waiting for this day. The other day, you sounded like a school kid. You were so excited. So tell me, share with us your perspective on this legislation passing and the opportunities in the industry going forward.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you, Mr. Bailey. I appreciate you having me on, and I even appreciate spending this much time getting to listen to all the people who have been honored, and listening to all the different panels and the people speaking, and even going back and forth with some folks in the chat and everything. This has been awesome. The biggest issue that I have, and I said this in the chat, that this event, this lineup, everyone who has spoken here, this event is literally 3 years late. This is a conversation that should have happened before we even went to a ballot referendum when we were fighting for, to get this legislatively legalized. And I'm not here to bash that process. I'm just saying it's just that we're just that far advanced in this conversation. And so when you look at this legislative bill and the entire process, it's illuminated from the inside out some very real issues, regarding how Black and brown people move in the cannabis space. This bill, the way everything is written up, you would, if you were to pull it apart with those things that are optional versus those things are guaranteed, literally 90% of the social equity stuff is optional. And so, when you look at it from that, and I'm sorry about that, when you look at it from that aspect, in terms of, what this means moving forward as far as the industry is concerned, at this point, we have to really start paying attention to who are the members of the CRC, the Cannabis Regulatory Commission. We really need to pay attention, what are their backgrounds? Are their backgrounds mostly in law enforcement? That's an indicator. At this point, for Black and brown people, we definitely need to start to identify all of the FUBU brands and all of the FUBU organizations, the For Us, By Us organizations. If you look at their sponsorship tree, there are only probably 2 organizations who are FUBU, who would have that FUBU label. And so allowing others to define for Black and brown people exactly what social equity is something that we have to regain that initiative and actually have those clear definitions for ourselves, and not allowing folks to feel empowered to weigh in on those subjects on what's best for Black and brown people. I don't like to use the term reparations when talking about cannabis, but I do like using the term restitution.
Okay, that's a very important point. But I also think that if this conversation is 3 years late, then it should have been happened a long time ago. Yeah, but the fact that it's happening now, and we're bringing all these voices into the industry, just that historically or prior to this, all these people were in their individual silos, and the only way they all got together was whether or not a newspaper reporter called them and interviewed somebody in the media, number one. Number two, you raise a very significant point relative to the CRC, because there are only 5 people on the commission. If 3 are appointed by the governor, that means that, not to negate Governor Murphy, but it means that if there's ever an issue, the gubernatorial piece always wins out, because the other 2 members are Sweeney's appointee and Coughlin's appointee. Right. So my conversation here, and I'll say it at the end, is that what we've done today is to assemble a work group. And so you're right, the work group should have been there, but here's the key. The work group should be in place going forward, because the work group is what should be helping guide and develop programs and policies for the CRC. And it's in that respect, when you think about it, and this is just looking at it as a whole, for African Americans and and Latino folks, as a community as a whole, our formal education on this plant and this industry is grossly below basic at this point. And it's because of that. Like, listen, we've been saying cannabis all day. That's all I've been hearing. But nobody said anything about hemp. And that is where the long money is. That is where the biggest kudos ought to go to Mayor Gusiara. Those are all it's when you really start getting into that, that's when you're starting to tap into the science, technology, engineering, and math of the cannabis and hemp industry. And if you add art, you got STEAM. And so these are all good. And in the time of COVID and COVID recovery, these are all good conversations that need to be had. But we need to have them amongst ourselves first, and then also have them amongst all of our allies as well. And that's where all roads lead back to education or lack thereof. Okay, appreciate that, Leo. David Nathan, you want to pick up on where Leo was at relative to the community perspective on this bill?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me, everybody. What an amazing group to be part of. There's very little I can add that's going to improve upon the discussion of the details of this particular bill. I think there are people here who know it a lot better than I do, much as I've been following along, and I see the shortcomings. My personal, what I think is the greatest shortcoming is actually the lack of home cultivation. And I understand there's a concern about how home cultivation would be regulated, but given that every other state that has legalized adult use cannabis has allowed some form of home cultivation, and none of them have gone back on that decision, should say something about the merits of that question. That is really both a social justice question for people of lower income who don't necessarily have the means to purchase the cannabis that they would most want, but also a public health perspective of people who need a particular strain for a medical condition and can't get it in the dispensaries. And if they can't, they should be allowed to grow it themselves. So that's what I think is the biggest shortcoming, and the one that I hope is addressed in 2021. So understanding that there are people who have been around in this social justice world much longer than I have, I think what I can add most to is the physician's perspective on this. And Doctors for Cannabis Regulation, which we started 4 or 5 years ago now, originally started with a board that was probably mostly white men. And now of our 8 board members, 4 are Black women. And I think that that's been a very natural evolution as the group itself and our platform of regulations has very much emphasized a priority on social justice. So we have 7 items in our platform of regulations. It includes home cultivation and government oversight and labeling and such, but that's only the first 3 of them. The rest of them are about social justice. And the reason that we place such emphasis on it, often in the face of resistance from the medical community who says that social justice is not a public health issue, and that social justice is not an issue for medical doctors to be opining on. And I wholeheartedly disagree, because there's a very simple connection. And that is that the drug war generally, and the war on cannabis specifically, has taken such a toll on communities of color and exacerbated the poverty of the impoverished. And if there's one thing that we all agree and know limits access to healthcare, it's finances and it's poverty. And the people who are least able to get healthcare are the people from minority communities, Black and brown communities. And that's not a coincidence. And its connection to the drug war is also not a coincidence. And so we not only need to stop the arrests, we also have to ensure that there is real equity. We've talked about social equity for a long time, but now DFCR and our board is really starting to promote more of a message of health equity, because it's only by raising up communities of color that we're going to be able to really have equity in healthcare and equity in access to healthcare. So that's been a real priority for us. And the other point that I would make is, as a physician, one of the best things I think I can do for communities of color and have striven to do is to try to educate those who might not have gotten the formal education on THC and CBD. If we can get that education to Black and brown people, we make them much more able to compete in the marketplace that is otherwise so dominated by the majority white community. So, I've said this many times, and if there are people there who have the desire to teach their communities, please be in touch with me, because if I can't do it, somebody else can from DFCR. And we want people to understand the science of cannabis so that we can promote the industry among people who most deserve entry into the industry.
Okay, thank you, David. You know, our next speaker, I think we all owe a great deal of gratitude because he put his future on the line, he put his livelihood on the line, and he said he didn't care what people thought. He thought he was right. And sometimes principle takes over privilege. And so New Jersey Weedman has been very principled about his engagement, his participation, and his involvement. So Ed, would you share your perspective on the new legislation and what do you think it means currently and going forward from an entrepreneur's perspective, because you are an entrepreneur. Take your mute off. Your mute is on. Take your mute off. Okay.
Okay, there we go. All right, first I want to say thank you for inviting me. I do appreciate it. I feel honored. Thank you. And I want to say big ups to Ken Walski and Jim Miller, because just about at every step of the way of my public advocacy for legalization, both those guys were always there. I've bumped heads with people. I've bumped heads with everybody. So, you know, over the years, I've bumped heads with Ken. I've bumped heads with Jim. I've bumped heads with everybody. And I feel like I came to this perspective because I was the victim, the angry guy that had his whole life ruined. What I planned on doing in my life got ruined because I got a marijuana charge. And all this, the last 20 something years has been like my revenge. Like I'm going to add. So yesterday, I wasn't happy with the vote. And I've said that. I've said my reasons for not being happy about it. I voted no on the ballot. And yesterday I hoped it got snowed out, you know? But looking back and looking to where we are today, yes, I have to be happy because this was not what was on the table in 1997. As much as I've complained to Senator Scutari, I would like to say to you right now, thank you for bringing it here where it's at now, okay? Reed Gasura, same thing. Dave, same thing. I could go down the list of people. I can just say thank you for being here too, okay? But I know I've bumped heads with people. I have a different opinion, a different perspective. Even right now, as I'm sitting here, I'm feeling like the odd man out because I feel like I represent the black market, the existing market right now. The people who are providing marijuana to the citizens of New Jersey right now didn't get anything out of that vote yesterday. I am very open about what I do because I believe in civil disobedience and all that. So everyone knows I'm selling weed. I mean, I got a sign right here saying I'm selling weed like I'm white as part of my protest. But I talked to a lot of people in the black market, and a lot of people in the black market didn't feel like they got anything out of it. No one's going to suddenly say, hey, I'm going to stop selling marijuana right now because they just voted to let the big corporations come in. They're giving them 37 licenses. There's no one saying that. The black market is thriving right now. I've heard Senator Scutari say and different politicians say part of the goal of all this was to destroy the black market, which again, I keep saying is not going to happen. It's almost laughable, to be honest with you. But fine. What are you going to do about us? I feel like I'm the elephant in the room too, because I am selling weed. I feel like I'm a guy that I spent close to 1,200 days in prison and jail over this issue of marijuana. And you can't give that back to me. I don't even want to apply for a license. I don't even see any under any circumstances that I would sign a piece of paper and ask to do this at any point. And there's lots of people like me that feel the same way. We're not going anywhere. And you can continue to arrest us. I don't think the public, by the way, would put us in prison, to be honest with you. If anybody got arrested right now, I say, take it to trial. Take it to trial. That vote in November, the 63%, that would also translate to juries too. And people aren't going to put you in prison for selling weed without a license. And, you know, who knows? Maybe some people would, but the vast majority would. And if that's how we have to force our inclusion by just resisting, then so be it. I want to be that voice. I am openly resisting not being included in this so-called legalization. I should be happy. I'm not happy. I'm not included. People like me are not included. I am openly selling weed right now. And I want to call it weed. I don't even want to call it cannabis now. You know, I want to go. I went to prison for weed. I went to prison for marijuana. And now you're all calling it cannabis, and it's legal if it's regulated cannabis. But we went to prison for marijuana, and we're labeled because we got felonies. But did you think 20 years ago I wanted to be some guy who ran around talking about legalizing marijuana? I was embarrassed at first myself. And then over the years, man, it became a cause. So yes, it did mean a lot yesterday. I did kind of feel like crying, even though I didn't really support exactly what was going on. I did feel like it meant something. It's even emotional now to me that, wow, it really is happening. Okay, so again, I criticize things a lot, people, I do. And you'll hear me, and that's why you even know me, because you see me criticizing things. Okay, so with that, you know, I'll just say thank you. Thank you, Senator Scutari. As much as I complain about you, thank you. Holly, you're still gonna get my texts and my Twitters too, by the way. I kind of harass Jamal by Twitter. Peace.
Well, let me just say this, Ed. I think that you may not realize it, but we appreciate you. We appreciate the words, and we appreciate the fact that you disagree. I'm a firm believer that it's okay to disagree. How we disagree becomes the impact and that which makes the difference. So I appreciate you. You know, one of the issues the research says is that the Black community has been afraid of this industry. That we've been afraid of it because either we have been unfairly incarcerated, that we're afraid of it because every Sunday when you go to church, the preacher will tell you the Lord is looking at you unfavorably. But things have changed. Things have evolved.
Things are changing.
Hold on, Ed. It's somebody else's turn.
Oh.
Okay. And so one of our conversations and one of our speakers is the Archbishop Timothy Paul from the Christian Orthodox Church. Bishop Paul, give us your perspective from the church's angle, because the church has been, in many cases, one of the places that folks have been miseducated about the industry. Do you have any thoughts there? Archbishop Paul?
Oh, yes. What a great platform. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I'll thank my good friend Leo Bridgewater. My only position and standpoint is from obviously the faith community. I heard the doctor talking about public health and talking about social justice, but particularly it was a big step for us to start engaging the faith community to even believe that this, and it was still a milestone, as you do know. I think I have a fellow colleague on the line, but education is going to be key in terms of resources for us helping assist in people understanding hemp, cannabis, the medical side of it, and as well as the recreational side of it. And I think that, you know, I've worked with communities. Obviously, John, you know, I'm in Massachusetts, and I've worked with the Massachusetts team and working with even minority businesses that are, we have one sister who finally has received her recreational license, and worked with her from an educational standpoint. So that's going to be very, very key. And the faith community can help promote the ideas of social injustice, and we can help promote the ideals of education and educating our communities, especially people of color. They'll listen maybe to a preacher. So that is very, very, very important. Thank you for inviting me, but this has been so wonderful. Thank you.
Well, Doc, before you go, can you comment a little bit about the two equity delivery, social equity delivery options up in Massachusetts?
I'm sorry, I am driving and I don't want to have an accident. But certainly, I think I know that you are aware, and we've been pushing, especially our legislatures, to make sure that there is equity. But primarily, I think New Jersey can be a model as you are beginning to develop. As you said, you have a working group. Massachusetts, we didn't really have that opportunity from the onset. We had a lot of opposition. A lot of our religious communities were in total opposition to even the legalization of marijuana. I took a different path. But to answer your question, I think we're closely on the right path. It still takes some pushing, and we've got clergy, a network of clergy that are still engaged in the whole process, even from the political to the faith and the community aspect of it.
Okay. Leo, what do you think? What would you like to see come up next, legislative-wise, from a community perspective?
Well, I would definitely like to see an evolution from that 67%, 2.7 million people voting for the adult use bill to translate to those same numbers going forward into 21, especially since this is an election year, local election year at that. And so making sure that we don't get legislative language and CRC responsibility confused. And that is why this is so important to have this conversation now, because now it's not just about who are the 5 members of the CRC, but who are also filling those subcommittees as well. Those other that will enact those programs that we have been talking about, because there are folks, we can talk hypothetical and we could talk theory, but then what about the ones that are already actually doing it right now? The Hope Wisemans, the Shayuna Data-Gs, the ones who are not preparing or not waiting, but actually doing it. And so this year, it's the identifying and the, like I said, of the FUBU brands, but also, us knowing how the different ways in which we can get into this industry, not just by plant touching, but Mr. Bailey, we have not said anything about the ancillary side of this business. And the ancillary side, that's not us waiting for a license. That's not us waiting for some social equity program or anything like that. Matter of fact, we can do it right now. You need the HVACs, you need the electricians, you need the lawyers, you need the accountants, you need the packaging, you need and don't forget, this is going to go legal federally within the next couple of years. They just passed the Marijuana Research Act a week ago, and then they passed the MORE Act. And there's some things that have to happen. There's some engagement that really needs to take place so that folks can understand the buffoonery that was added to the MORE Act the night before they actually voted for it. So the MORE Act version that was voted for last week now says that if you have a state or a federal charge of cannabis, you would not be allowed to get a federal permit. And that was added in the night before they voted, and then they voted for it the next day. Now, of course, the MORE Act is going to fall. It's going to die in the Senate, but it did set a bad precedent. And these are things that we don't talk about right here on the local level because we don't know to be engaged like that. And so, again, the engagement, and also the pointing out of the different pathways in which to go, because that ancillary side, most people don't realize ancillary businesses in the cannabis industry make between 1.5 to 2 times as much as the actual plant touching business. So the supporting businesses make more than the plant touching businesses.
That's a very important point. And for those who haven't realized it, go to your Google on your website, 30 important cannabis businesses for 2021. Ed, you got anything else you want to say or share here? I interrupted you a minute ago. Is there something else you'd like to share? Turn your mute button. Get your mute button.
There we go. I was going to say to Leo's point earlier when he said about reform and the word that I use is reefer reparations.
No,
And-
restitution. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, and but I only use I use it as reefer reparations, and when I'm talking about black, brown, blue, whoever was destroyed by our policies of the past. You know, what destroyed us 20 years ago is making people millionaires now, and it's the exact same thing. And I think that there could some social equity in that, just, and that would be for everybody. So you wouldn't get people arguing for just black people or just brown people or just this, that, and the other. We should, all the human beings that have felony convictions, whether it's a mass expungement, whether it's some type of monetary help or assistance, anything. But I think that should be a discussion too. Reefer reparations for everyone.
Thank you, Ed. And so I'm going to use that as a segue to go towards the social equity conversation. Jarrell Register, have you joined us yet?
I'm here.
Yeah. We've been talking about social equity, and one of the things that came up early was the Curio Community Investment Fund, for lack of a better term. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about what you want to do.
Sure. So we're about halfway through our fundraising process with a target of $30 million intended to support diverse dispensary owners in our target states. So mostly East Coast limited license states, with the idea that we can pair access to capital with our award-winning business model of what we term a dispensary as a wellness center. So Curio is based here in Maryland, one of the medical markets, and we function very significantly towards the clinical end of the dispensary marketplace. But we're going to franchise the wellness center and support diverse entrepreneurs by removing that access to capital barrier that has come up several times as we've been talking here. And really the intention is based around diversifying the industry with a market solution that pays, right? So make it profitable to invest in diversity, right? So we've set up a private equity fund that establishes a method by which investors can recognize the value of the talent of entrepreneurs in the diverse community.
Okay. And is that something that's going to be national? Is it something that's just going to be in New Jersey? Is something that, you know, how long before this fund will be available to potential applicants?
Sure. So we're still in the capital raising process. There's some regulatory steps we have to take with the franchising piece. So my expectation is sometime in the first quarter next year, we'll be through the regulatory piece. We'll have the capital raised, and we'll start looking towards where there's licensing opportunities, opportunities for dispensaries. So our target states include New Jersey, here at home for me in Maryland, but also Pennsylvania, Massachusetts. We're looking at Ohio, Florida, Missouri, Michigan, Illinois, and I apologize if I'm missing any of my targets.
It's a multi-state fund.
Exactly, but the idea is to go to states where the market is arranged in a way that lets a dispensary do two things, really: incubate while the licenses are limited. So really, we have a lot of conviction around the idea that a diverse entrepreneur who has the support of a proven brand and operating model, that makes for a very attractive applicant, right? So our intention is to support entrepreneurs who want to be in those limited license states, because we think that's the best shot they've got at success, right? They're not subject to kind of the broader, more fierce competition in the more broadly licensed states. And frankly, over time, we expect the whole world to go fully legalized. It's really just about those initial phases of getting the business up and off on its feet, so that you're ready to compete with the bigger guys over time.
Okay. So Trace, is that viable? Is that a viable option for a city like Trenton, one? And two, you sit on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusive Task Force for the Cannabis Trade Federation, and y'all are looking at making sure that all of your members are dealing with social equity types of activity. Give us your thought about the social equity, your experience in social equity. I mean, you come from, I'm not going to put your business out, but everybody knows who you are. We come from being an incarcerated felon to being a significant businessman, not only in the city of Trenton, but in the country. And I think that, that has meaning to it. And so give me your interpretation of the social equity piece. And is what Jarrell just mentioned, that fund, is that a viable option for us to consider?
Now, Darrell laid it out perfectly, JB. This is what it's all about. We have to begin to realize that the war on drugs was not targeted at just one individual. It was targeted at an entire community. And when we look at the devastation of that community, it really deals and boils down to economics. Far too often before this industry came, Black folks wasn't getting loans anyway. So when we talk about creating funds and creating opportunities to access capital, I think that's where the rubber hits the road. But I think more importantly, JB, is all about holding people accountable. I talk about my from the block to the boardroom story, and no, you're not putting my business out there, JB. I wrote a book on it. So when I talk about the from the block to the boardroom story, I want to make sure that I'm clear when we talk about economics. I'm the former number 226926. I was able to come home from prison after 2.5 years, and within 7 years, create a multi-million-dollar construction company based off the skills that I learned as a drug dealer here in Trenton for 17 years. Those skills are transferable. One of the things that we've been talking about on the task force is how do we create businesses, not just businesses in the cannabis industry. Everybody don't want to go in the cannabis industry. The fact of the matter is that we need to create businesses in the African-American communities, period. All around, mom and pop stores, gas stations, jewelry stores. But all stores should be supported, and we need to begin to create economic development through this industry in which we can. So to your question, JB, yes, it can be done here in Trenton. It can be done across this country. This is some of the stuff that we've talked about. As you know, I've created a course called Reentry Ventures that teach formerly incarcerated people how to start and run the business. One of the things that I learned of being in some of the toughest prisons in New Jersey is that some of the most creative, talented, and I think you can speak to this, innovative people I've met in jail. We must begin to bring those folks into the industry. And last but not least, we got to and let's stop talking about scratching people records for minimum amount of weed on them. The fact of the matter is that all the drugs that I sold drugs with, they started out selling weed and graduated. They started out getting high on weed and then graduated. The war on drugs has devastated our communities across this country. We must begin to repair those communities. And we can begin with this industry right here. New Jersey has the opportunity to write some of the most progressive laws in the country. Let's really begin to be the Garden State. Thank you, JB.
Nicholas Katari, Assemblyman Holly, Assemblyman Zicker, the governor, Diana Waynu, anybody who has any influence on this call. Y'all should be supporting Tracy Syphax getting on this Cannabis Regulatory Commission. Y'all need a voice like that there because he will make sure that we don't get, quote, messed over. Moving on, Amo Sinha, Executive Director, ACLU. Amo, give us the ACLU's interpretation of this legislation and what do you think it'll mean for communities and from a social equity perspective?
Hey, John, thank you so much for having me and thank you, everybody. Yeah, let me just start by saying, yesterday was a historic day for New Jersey. To see that legislation come through is something that the ACLU has been working on since 2014 in earnest. We announced the creation of New Jersey United for Marijuana Reform, which included Dr. Nathan and a whole bunch of advocates, including the NAACP. We had Todd Edwards from the NAACP on there, and other civil rights organizations, law enforcement, and faith leaders, et cetera. And we were going for legislation that would right the wrongs of the war on drugs to legalize cannabis from a racial justice lens. And we ended up, pursuing legislation until 2019, which is when the legislature decided that they were going to move to the ballot question. And then, we sort of switched gears and formed NJCAN 2020, which was the ballot question initiative. I cheered the campaign for that. And we spent, hundreds of thousands of dollars from the ACLU and ran a traditional political campaign and got, what we got, which was close to 70% of the vote, pro legalization, which gave the legislature its marching orders. And the reason I say it gave the legislature its marching orders is because we didn't prove anything new. Everybody knew that the ballot question was going to pass. It was just a matter of what was the margin of victory going to be, and what were the reasons that people were going to vote yes. And the margin of victory was bigger than any other cannabis question in the country ever. And the margin of victory was one of the biggest in New Jersey history for ballot questions. And we won every county in the state, which is just remarkable. And the reason, we talked about why people voted is because we led with racial justice messaging every step of the way. We talked about the fact that we're incarcerating people for something that most people believe should be legalized. We talked about the fact that Black folks are 3.5 times more likely to be arrested for possession than white folks. We talked about the waste of hundreds of millions of dollars on enforcing prohibition. We talked about the missed opportunity costs for people as a result of the collateral consequences of an arrest, including the fact that they may lose out on financial aid for school, or all of these hundreds of other collateral consequences that people have to suffer with for the rest of their lives. So we talked about all of those things in our campaign, and it resulted in people voting yes the way they did. And so, that I think set the stage for what we wanted to see in legislation coming forward. And I have to say, the legislation that passed yesterday, as other people have said, is not perfect, right? It is not perfect. It is missing key elements that I think others have pointed out, including Weedman, about making sure that we create incentives for people that are in the legacy market right now to actually be a part of the regulated market, right? Like, you got to make it easier for people, eliminate barriers of entry. License caps are no good. But the things that are good about the bill include the fact that we are going to have some serious community reinvestment, as others have touched on. I'm not going to go into all of that, but it's the most ambitious community reinvestment proposal that we've seen in the country. And so I think it's really important to note that and recognize that the week of the election, when the first version of the legislation was introduced, we didn't see that in there. It wasn't in the first version of the bill. And the ACLU and our partners pushed back and said, this is unacceptable. We're not going to support something that only funds police and the Cannabis Regulatory Commission. And in fact, I think any money going to the police is a problem. So we ended up pushing back, and we got what we got, which is 70% of the sales tax going to social equity and 100% of the excise fee going there. Another thing that I want to point out is decriminalization, which decriminalizes possession up to 6 ounces. So that means that people are no longer going to be arrested for up to 6 ounces of weed. And that's a huge deal, because that's the biggest, again, the biggest number that's decriminalized in the country. The next down from that is Ohio, and that's at 4 ounces. So I just want to clarify one thing, because I saw some things in the chat that I think need some explanation, John, if that's okay with you, because there's some misinformation out there that I just want to touch on. The first is that expungements, there was an expungement bill that passed last year. That's,
hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. How long do you need to do that?
Give me 1 minute.
No problem.
Okay. The expungement bill that passed last year actually touches on a number of things that people care about, right? Like, so folks are going to have access and be eligible for expungements up to possession of 5 pounds with intent to distribute sometime soon. They're eligible right now, but sometime soon there's going to be a more automated process to get there. The second thing that I want to touch on is that January 1st is the constitutional amendment day. We're going to end up in this unprecedented situation where if the governor doesn't sign the bills before January 1, we're going to have a constitutional amendment on something without there being laws to implement it. So there may be litigation around that and things that people need to clarify. But the reality is that when the governor signs the bills, that's when that's when possession is going to be legalized and possession up to 6 ounces is going to be decriminalized. It won't create the industry when the governor signs a bill because that's going to take a regulatory process. But if you go to the bottom of the 250-page legalization bill, there's a section about effective dates. And that outlines which sections of the bill are effective immediately and which sections of the bill are effective later. And I think that's something that people should take a look at. So I'll stop there, but I think this is all great news for New Jersey. It brings us a step forward. We're going to stop over 32,000 arrests that are happening annually in New Jersey. We're going to help people restore their lives as well.
Thank you, Emil. I appreciate those comments and the work that the ACLU is doing. My good friend, Charlana McKithen, Executive Director of Garden State Normal and the Garden State Normal Foundation. Good sister, give us your interpretation of what you think this legislation bill means for New Jersey citizens from your point of view.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. I appreciate the invitation. I am the founder and executive director of Garden State Normal. We are a 501c4 to the legislators with campaigns that we can endorse and a 501c3. So that means we are a Black-owned nonprofit. And so that goes to talking about what we can do and help to in New Jersey with social equity. It is my responsibility in this role to make sure I can get as many Black and brown people to the table as possible. And that's my promise. I'm willing to work with any group that is willing to do that. We need to get this information out there for free. We are a patient and consumer advocacy group. And that's the one thing that is not being mentioned in these conversations. We are the reason why this industry is here. And so when you go to figure out what strain, you have the patient consumer in mind. Packaging, you have the patient consumer in mind. So with that, we need to make sure you have a patient consumer advocate at the table to give you their input on how to move your business in this industry. From a social justice perspective, we appreciate the work that was done on the decriminalization bill. I'm working with an organization called National Expungement Week. And what we're doing is we're going to do monthly clinics in New Jersey to expunge records for free. And I have a member that's in the organization who trains people to be able to get an entry-level job in the cannabis industry. And that's not where we want to be, but it's a start. So we get the records expunged and we get people up and running, and it'll give them better income than what they are receiving now and a hope for the future. In this industry, we have to bridge the gap between industry and consumers because one needs the other. And because we're here, because the benefits to patients and consumers, we have to give back to social equity and social justice because that's what needs to be done to right the wrongs to the communities that were hit hardest by the war on drugs. So that's very important. Another aspect from social equity, if you heard Leo Bridgewater and you heard Faye Coleman say what business she's in, it's the hemp business. Commissioner Frisbee, we talked about last year this time that we need to have the conversation about the hemp business as an entry-level way to transition into the marijuana business. And here it is a year later, we're still having conversations, but we haven't had no action. We could use hemp to teach people how to trim, to give them knowledge of the plant from one perspective, and then they can transition into the other perspective. So with all of those things in mind, that's how we can create social equity and prepare ourselves for an industry to help us get a seat at the table. 2020 has been the year of the cannabis plant from the perspective of delivery being an essential business, the ballot questions across the country. Cannabis is here to stay and it's growing at a fast pace. We went this year from social distancing social gatherings being illegal to smoking marijuana being legal. So it's been a very different year. And let's go into 2020 doing what's best for New Jersey. We have a model that's historic and can lead the nation. Thank you to the legislators, and also thank you to the people that were behind the scene creating the language. Thank you for your time and the recognition, and I appreciate everything that everyone has done, including New Jersey Weed Man. And let me say this, my income is 300% below the poverty rate. I do not make money off this industry, so take that into consideration, sir.
Thank you, Charlotta. Appreciate your interest, your commitment over the years. And you don't know this, but one of your biggest admirers sitting there smiling, Janine LaRue. She said, you make sure you get Charlotta involved in this conversation. And I said, hey, I've already reached out to her. And she said something that she usually says to Sam, good boy. And so having said that, our next speaker is Bill Caruso. Bill, did you get a chance to join us?
Can I just say one thing? I want to thank Ms. LaRue. And also, if you want to get involved and have expungement clinics in your area, you can contact me or Tracy Syfax, who's partnering with us also. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem, sister. That was important. If Bill's not here, our next speaker in the social equity perspective is the very own Ken Walski, Executive Director of Coalition for Medical Marijuana, New Jersey. Ken, welcome to the conversation. Thank you for your service. Congratulations on your recognition. Give us your thoughts on the fact that we're here and where we go from here.
Thank you very much, John, for inviting me and for having this conversation. I'm a registered nurse, John. I've been an RN for 44 years here in the state of New Jersey. In 2002, I asked the New Jersey State Nurses Association if they would not endorse medical marijuana, and they did. And that was really part of the beginning of the Coalition for Medical Marijuana in New Jersey. Jim Miller and I founded the coalition in 2003, and we are a nonprofit educational organization and a 501c3 public charity. Our organization was instrumental in getting the Compassionate Use Medical Marijuana Act introduced into the legislature in 2005 and passed into law in 2010. In 2014, we endorsed legalization of marijuana, and we're very grateful for what happened yesterday and for all the effort that so many people put into that to bring about legalization of marijuana here in New Jersey. But my advocacy for marijuana reform really goes back another 10 or 11 years to 1966 when I was a senior at Trenton High School, and I did a paper on drugs, and I found that the government was exaggerating the dangers of marijuana and they were denying the medical benefits of marijuana. So I became very active as a spokesman or an advocate rather for medical marijuana in the 1960s. And we made a lot of progress then. In 1969, only 12% of the United States residents endorsed legalization, but 10 years later, that more than doubled to 30% of the people endorsed legalization. And I really thought that marijuana was going to be legalized, very shortly. But instead, there was a reinvigoration of the war on drugs, and that led to a policy of mass incarceration in the United States. And actually, I was part of that policy. In 1984, I started working for the New Jersey Department of Corrections. And at that time, there were 9,000 inmates in the New Jersey Department of Corrections. When I retired in 2006, 22 years later, there were 27,000 inmates in the New Jersey Department of Corrections. The inmate population tripled just in the time that I was working there. And 86% of those 27,000 inmates were Black and Hispanic. Now, this disproportionate minority confinement really showed me that the criminal justice system in America was broken. There was institutional racism and institutional classism that permeated the system that determined who got arrested, who got prosecuted, and who got convicted. And the war on drugs was at the heart of this, John. This policy was propelled by increased penalties for drug violations and increased enforcement of drug laws. And what this led to was devastation in the inner cities. Like I said, I grew up in Trenton in the 60s, and now I see what Trenton is like and the other inner cities in New Jersey. The poverty rate is 28% in Trenton, and it goes to 38% and 39% in Atlantic City and in Camden. So this is a problem that's going to take generations to fix. It's no one piece of legislation is going to fix this. I think we made a really great start, but it's going to take generations of rebuilding these communities. And this is a very great start to it, but basically that's all it is. And so the work we have lies ahead of us. And so thank you for having me. And I just wanted to let you know my perspective on this, John.
Well, Ken, one of the reasons we're having these conversations is to get these different perspectives in the room, because often they don't get there. Our next speaker is Jessica Gonzalez. And Jessica, as I mentioned before, you're the only woman of Hispanic that I've seen in this conversation. But I know there are other probably brown folks in the state who are very interested. Would you please share your perspective on cannabis legalization in the industry from a social equity perspective, Jessica?
Sure. And thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the award as well. And thank you to everybody who paved the road and were here way before I was, for me to be able to do the work that I do. So from folks in the legacy market to the patients to the advocates, really tremendous work, and congratulations on yesterday. So you did mention that I am the only Latina woman here, and one of the things, that I think people fail to realize is that actually all the 77% of federal cannabis arrests are Latino. And the reason that that's the case is because immigration is federal. And so I do consider it a privilege to be able to advocate just because of my citizenship, my career, and my ability to also speak English, which I know that there's a huge disconnect with the Latino community, because a lot of these materials and a lot of these conferences are not bilingual. And so that's something that I've been working on with the Minority Cannabis Business Association to ensure that that community is not forgotten, because the Latino community does tend to get left out of the conversation constantly. And I do find myself being the only Latina in the room or on panels. So it is a tremendous privilege for me to be able to do what I do. But in terms of the legalization and everything happening, I was part of the NJCAN, the Social Impact Committee. I had the tremendous honor of working with some fabulous advocates like Ken and Amal and also Leo as well. And in terms of really, what happened yesterday, I think that it is something to be celebrated for everybody's efforts in getting this to the table. And however, while we didn't get pretty much everything that we wanted in terms of social equity, I think it does create a strong foundation in order for us to build upon it. However, to call New Jersey the golden standard of social equity, or to really say that New Jersey is at the front lines of equity, I think is a particularly dangerous rhetoric, because there were a lot of things that were missing from that bill that we've seen in 6 other states with social equity programs. And the success of social equity programs has not really been the case historically. The implementation of it has been disastrous. So it's important that we recognize that the implementations haven't gone so smoothly. And so while we can add a lot of pretty language into the bills and into the statutes, we have to make sure that the practical implications are also taken into consideration. And so by virtue of where I stand at the intersection of legal, business, and policy, I've had the misfortune of having to advise a lot of different companies who have not been able to see their dreams come to fruition in the cannabis space because of the high cost that it takes. So when we're talking about quote unquote social equity initiatives in terms of percentages for different demographics, that isn't particularly enough if we don't provide the education, we don't provide the capital, we don't provide the incubation or the mentorship services. That means that none of these, really kind of great and ambitious provisions in the bill are never really going to see the light of day, and we're not going to really see those communities that we want, who really should be benefiting. And the main factor is we never got a social equity applicant status in the bill. And I'm hoping that we can work with this on the regulatory level. And the reason that I say this is because a social equity applicant status with tax revenue funneled to social equity applicants is the cornerstone of any social equity program. The only successful social equity program we have seen in the country didn't take place on a state level. It took place on a municipal level in Oakland, California. That is the gold standard of what we've seen. That's what we should be aspiring to, not what we've seen in Massachusetts and Illinois. We should aspire to become like Oakland and learn from them. So I am hoping that moving forward that we take this into consideration, that there is still much more to be done. But I think at the same time, we can celebrate what happened. But I do really just want to get across that kind of perpetuating the conversation of this is the golden standard, this is the golden standard, we're at the front lines, is just going to continue to exacerbate the fact that these communities really aren't getting it. And so we can say it and we can package it any way we want, but language really does matter. And I am hoping that on the regulatory level, we will see a lot more changes. The fight is still not done, but definitely congratulations, and to everybody who paved the foundation for it. Thank you so much. And once again, privileged to be here and privileged to be considered amongst all of you.
Thank you, Reverend Gonzalez. Our next speaker, since you talked about that, is Tahir Johnson, who's the membership manager and the DEO coordinator for the National Cannabis Industry Association. And if I'm correct, Tahir, you there?
Yes, sir.
If I'm correct, isn't the Oakland ordinance, wasn't that one of the 10 ordinances that was floated by the Minority Cannabis Industry Association that was then taken by that California city and implemented?
Yes, so MCBA, and I believe you're talking about the model ordinance that was written by MCBA, and yes, it was. And it's also been a model where different legislation has been used in different social equity programs across the country. I would say that it probably is one of the go-to documents, but it's also something that is being revised because as we found, as Jessica mentioned, some things that are meant in policy as you go through and actually carried out in practice, there sometimes can be a disconnect. So we've learned from, everything that we've been doing for a number of years and hope to continue to evolve that so that it can meet the needs of social equity in the industry.
Okay. I appreciate those comments because it's very important. And our last speaker is Jackie Cornell. Jackie, will you take a minute and share your perspective on the industry and sort of the last comments from our social equity perspective?
I mean, I like how you leave me to close after all of these prolific speakers, because there's really not, I think a ton more to say that hasn't been said already, right? We know that yesterday, and I said this at the very beginning, was sort of like the beginning linchpin to move forward on what is going to be a variety of changes. I think most people know for better or for worse. I think some of you think for worse. I hope some of you think for better. Spent most of my career as a regulator at the federal government and at the Department of Health before leaving, much because of the advocacy on this conference call, right? And in this sort of virtual room. And so for me, the implementation is the most important part. We write pieces of legislation all the time, but it's how that will see the light of day and how the CRC, there's been a thread, I think, Jessica, you have a hashtag now, who sits in those seats. They will be incredibly important. And interestingly enough, are not Senate confirmed for this first seating round, right? They'll have to be Senate confirmed moving forward, but these initial slots, I think, are really, to me, where the guts of how all of the things that we talk about and that we care about will come to pass. And I think that is where I would hope that we start to now pivot and continue to put pressure on. Amazing work has now happened to get us to this point, but now it's this implementation phase. And the last thing I'll just sort of leave with, I know that this conversation has been very much anchored in New Jersey and rightfully so. But I think it's important to think about what opportunities we now have for conversations in concert with the federal government, and opportunities that were previously closed to us over the last 4 years. There's a lot, and people will be quick to say, Congress, and I will agree with you on that. The Biden administration and the Kamala Harris administration have a lot of deference in what they can do administratively and what departments and what memos can happen. I mean, we're probably going to see some new version of the Cole memo, right? There will be a variety of things that happen at health, at FDA, in transportation, at justice. And so I think what I would love to see is our ability to use New Jersey as an incubator to give opportunities to the federal government to see ways to do it better, right? And so to really start to anchor these conversations in what do we need here and how can we be the testing ground for better opportunities, better ways of doing it. Just brought up Oakland, and I think that there's threads that can be pulled from Oakland. It's not perfect, nothing is. But how can we start to think about, okay, how do we become the model, right? And how do we become the place where we can say, look at what's happening here. We also, by the makeup of our congressional delegation here in New Jersey, have Frank Pallone, which has a very important seat. Senator Cory Booker has an important seat. Senator Bob Menendez on banking. So our delegation, there's an opportunity to educate them in a way that I think is unique because of the density of our state and the seats in which the leadership positions that they hold in Washington, right? They are listened to in a way that is different by nature of their committees. So this is not to turn this into a federal conversation, but it's also to just sort of talk about that mirroring of what and how these two things can dance together. So John, I have just been so inspired by this group. And thank you again for pulling us all together. Thank you to everybody who's on this. It's been a total treat to be with you all today.
No problem. So today's cannabis legalization in New Jersey discussion, what's next, has been informative, inspiring, and to some degree invigorating. What we've learned nationally in states and on local municipalities discussions around cannabis and social equity is a cannabis legalization journey. I will say it again, is that there are many more questions than answers, that we can agree without being disagreeable, and how we disagree or agree can be just as important as the subject being discussed. What we now know is that what we've always known. Prior to legalization, there were challenges, choices, and restricted or selected opportunity for some. Now there should be access to more opportunity, but also more hard choices and more challenges. To get it right, possibly more so now that legalization is here. In my earlier remarks, I half-heartedly called this gathering a work group. If we are going to be authentic in this cannabis endeavor, that is what is needed in New Jersey, a statewide cannabis work group. That's what's next to confront the post-legalization challenges, choices, and the opportunities that come with legalization. Cannabis leaders in New Jersey, government, industry, and community should take advantage of the diverse group of thought experts and others across the state that brings a wealth of past experiences, intellectual property, best practices, and resources to the landscape. BCI will continue our outreach efforts throughout New Jersey to help facilitate such a cannabis work group and the continuing social equity discussion. Again, thank you all for your time and attention today. Congratulations one more time to Scott Rutter, our honorees, our Cannabis Beacon of Lights, our Cannabis Champions. Thank you to our sponsors, presenters, speakers, our Zoom hosts, Mercer County Commissioner Sam Frisbee, who, if you look in your chat room, you'll see that he's holding a fundraiser on Monday. Please attend. And the members of the Capital City Area Black Caucus, who are also sponsoring a women's leadership roundtable discussion with Janine LaRue and Tennille McCoy tomorrow at noon. And to our Zoom audience, you have a good evening, happy holidays, everyone stay safe. In the words of the old Negro spiritual, y'all be good now, huh?
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Mr. Bailey. Good job.
No problem. And we'll put us, we'll leave out with a little music or something so that folks can get in the room if y'all need to.
Oh, the ambiance. You setting the ambiance.
Yeah, we gotta do a little something.
Wonderful job to everyone. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much.
See you, Jess. Sam, I'll talk to you later, brother.
I'm looking forward to it, man.
Yeah,
You're
man.
right. We do need more conversations like this, and they're easy to do with Zoom.
Good job, everybody. Good job. This was amazing.
This was great.
Big
Hi,
Ed.
everyone.
Good to see you, Ed.
Hey, man, good to see you.
Everybody, looking forward to working with everybody. Thank you for your time.
Ms. LaRue, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Oh, man, one of my
You
mentors.
all are just amazing. I'm
Thank
telling
you.
you, we're in good hands.
Yeah, thank you, Miss LaRue, for this. Been waiting a while to get this done. So yeah,
Hey,
thank you.
Leo, you're the man. You're the man.
Hey, Jim.
I love that hat.
Hey, Jim,
I'm ready
you're
for the
still
party.
glad the suits are here?
Am I the Jim you're referring to?
Yes.
Hey, this Jim Miller.
Jim Miller.
Yeah, Jim Miller.
Are you still glad the suits are here?
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to regale you all for dinner. Maybe another time, huh?
Yes, indeed. Lefty.
Hi, Jim.
Yeah, good to see you all. I wish I
Ed Grimes. How you doing, Ed?
Great to see you all. You were due a rare 2 minutes from me, you know, and you all missed it. I'll tell you what, I'll do a 2-minute soliloquy and put it on my Facebook page.
Great.
Good.
There's one thing that
Where's Ken? Did he leave? Hi, David.
David.
Take care, Ed. Love you.
All right. Love you too. Thanks for everything.
Absolutely.
Commissioner, see you. John, thank you.
Kowalski, good holiday. Good seeing you.
Okay, guys.
Ed,
take
we'll
care.
talk.
Okay.
Happy
sounds
holidays,
good.
everyone.
Thank you.
Happy holidays to you, Janine.
Happy
And
holidays.
everyone else.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Happy holidays to all.
Mr. Weedman, I want to meet you personally. You're a star. I hear so many good things about you.
He's from Winslow Township.
No.
Old school.
I'm
No.
from Sicklerville.
That's where
He's
I
one of-
raised my kids.
I know.
Here.
I heard.
What years were you there?
I graduated from Edgewood in '82.
We were there at the same time.
He graduated
Where'd
with
you
Chuck.
live?
He graduated with Chuck and Mary. Well, Mary was after him, but Chuck.
Yes. Yep. Let's see. And then Aberdale and Arbor Meadows.
Arbor Meadows.
Yeah, one Aberdale Lane.
Yeah. Who are your parents?
Elizabeth Brown. She remarried Elizabeth Brown and Bob Fortune, Robert Fortune.
Oh my goodness. We gotta get together. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'm a lifelong Sicklervillian.
That's right.
I moved out like I don't know, maybe 1998 or 97.